Our story begins with our protagonist, Jinfrey, entering the building and experiencing a familiar sensation. He thinks to himself that, although it should be his first time in this setting, he feels nostalgic, a sentiment that isn't new to him as he has felt this familiarity as far back as he can remember. It makes him believe he has known this world since the beginning. Someone then calls his name and thanks him for waiting, asking him if he is there today for the adventurer's registration. He replies with a yes. The lady begins typing something on her computer, and he notices a similarity with the lady, feeling as though he has met her before. With a smile, she tells him that everything is set and they should display the window. Suddenly, the system pops up in front of him and informs him that his authentication will begin once he waves his right hand. Surprised by this, he remembers the sense of deja vu he has been feeling. When he doesn't respond, the lady asks if something is wrong, but he remains silent, realizing that these are memories from his previous life, memories of playing in this world. He is now confident that the place he is currently in is part of a game known as Grand 7, a virtual world where players journey across 7 continents to achieve world peace. It's a classic online game. He is stunned as memories of that world flood his mind. Jinfrey, just a normal person who dreams of becoming an adventurer and earning enough riches to provide a fulfilling life for his family, shakes in disbelief that the world he had been living in was just the game world from his previous life. Although the realization seems crazy, he smiles, thinking it means he is virtually unstoppable. The lady, looking worried, asks him if he is alright because he has been trembling for a while. He tells her not to mind him, dismissing his trembling as just a warrior's excitement. The system informed him that the authentication would begin once he waved his right hand. While he wondered why his previous memories had returned now, he decided to use these recollections to his advantage moving forward. The system displayed that he was 19 years old, but his level and job were listed as none. Also, all his stats were unknown. The lady replied that she understood and told him to take care. He then walked through the portal and was surprised to find himself in a floating space. The system indicated that he had entered the baptismal altar. He was amazed that even the baptismal altar looked exactly like it did in the game, and he knew that in the game's tutorial stage, 5 new adventurers were to come together. He noticed that everything was unfolding just as it had in the game. But now it was his reality. If he died, that would be the end. However, he thought if he could leverage his knowledge from his past life, becoming a successful adventurer wouldn't just be a dream. The announcer then informed them that the baptism ritual would begin in 30 seconds, urging them to choose their equipment. He smiled, noticing that even the announcement was the same as in the game. He watched other players rush toward the floating weapons to make their selections. 2 players scrambled for the Guardian Spear, ranked E+ with 21 attack and 50 durability. The bald man yelled at a woman to let go of the spear, but she retorted that she had grabbed it first. Meanwhile, a nerd was reaching for the red sword, ranked E with 19 attack and 60 durability, when another man punched him and claimed the sword for himself. Jinfrey watched calmly, remembering he had witnessed this scenario too. The force job system would depend on their performance in the baptism ritual, and their job choices would be limited. He knew this system was particularly unfair to beginners, recalling his own previous life when he had repeatedly reset until a desirable job appeared. After the bald man overpowered the woman for the spear, he noticed Jinfrey and taunted him, calling him a sloth and mockingly asking if he was acting smug. Ignoring the bald man, Jinfrey walked towards the left where the weapons were arrayed and focused on the weapon he had in mind. He stopped in front of a normal short sword, ranked F- with only 1 attack and 90 durability. The bald man mockingly shouted that it had only 1 attack stat, warning him not to come crying when he ended up with a poor job. Jinfrey just smiled, pondering the common assumption that an adventurer's strength is determined by their job. What if that common sense was wrong? He chose the normal short sword, confident that a mob's knowledge couldn't compare with that of a hardcore player, and believing that the only right choice was that very sword. When they had all selected their weapons, the voice announced that the baptism ritual would begin and that they had a 5-minute time limit. Flies then appeared above them, and the voice instructed them to defeat as many creatures as possible. He recognized the creatures before him as winged centipedes, a species unique to the baptism ritual, known for their paralyzing poison that could immobilize anyone. The bald man teasingly told him to try not to get killed and arrogantly smiled at him, prompting Jinfrey to sigh and wonder what the bald man's problem was. He thought it best to ignore such behavior, recognizing that such types were common, even in the game. As the announcer declared the start of the ritual, the winged centipedes charged at them. One of the centipedes swooped lower towards him, and he noticed that its appearance and movements were identical to those in the game, which meant their weak point must be the same too. As the creature rushed to attack, he charged forward, drew his sword, and, despite the rough critical hit system, he swung his sword and easily slashed the creature. The system then popped up, confirming he had defeated the winged centipede, leaving the other adventurers shocked, but he simply smiled and confidently thought that it was perfect. The bald man accused him of just being lucky and warned him not to get cocky. However, the truth was the bald man couldn't believe he had taken it down with one hit, and wondered what exactly Jinfrey had done. Jinfrey knew that most games had bugs, and it was normal. This game had one too, a bug that could only be used in the baptism ritual. If they hit the winged centipede's weak point with the normal short sword, it would result in a one-hit kill. Confident that it was the same as in the game, he walked closer to the swarm of winged centipedes, armed with this knowledge. Meanwhile, he saw the lady and the others struggling to fight. The bald man managed to kill some winged centipedes and proudly shouted for everyone to look at his skills, boasting that with such prowess, he would definitely secure the strongest job, the swordsman. Jinfrey thought the bald man was merely distracting others with loud, unnecessary bravado, making him worse than some trolls in the game. Suddenly, a winged centipede appeared close to him, but he managed to dodge it. It tried to attack him from behind, which he also dodged, thinking this might be more fun than in the game. As it swooped down to attack again, he bent his body down, and it was caught off guard when he jumped up and slashed it into pieces. The voice announced that the time limit was over and instructed them to conclude the baptism ritual. It then informed them that job selection would be based on their performance. As the system interface appeared before each adventurer, 2 players who had defeated 7 winged centipedes saw their available job choices: hunter, compounder, and shield user. One man remarked that defeating 7 didn't offer good job options, while a woman expressed her disappointment at not being able to become a summoner, acknowledging that reality often differed from one's desires. The nerd, who hadn't defeated any creatures, found himself unable to register as an adventurer with no available jobs. The bald man laughed loudly, boasting that he had killed 15 winged centipedes. With 15 kills, his job choices included fighter, thief, hunter, and swordsman. He then turned to Jinfrey, noticing him deep in thought while looking at his own system window. Calling him a lucky guy, he asked Jinfrey what jobs he had been offered. Jinfrey, looking puzzled, didn't respond, leaving the bald man shocked upon seeing his options. The system displayed that Jinfrey had defeated 33 winged centipedes, with available job choices being swordsman, mage, thief, fighter, summoner, hunter, shield user, compounder, and alchemist. The bald man couldn't fathom how Jinfrey had the option to choose from all those jobs with 33 kills. Annoyed, he walked away, dismissively telling Jinfrey he could choose swordsman too. Jinfrey calmly responded that it was good for him, but internally noted that with only 15 kills, the bald man's chance of being offered the swordsman job was less than 2%, making the bald man truly the fortunate one. He was aware that swordsman and summoner were considered the strongest jobs in the game, but he had already decided on his choice. Shortly thereafter, the system confirmed his job selection and awarded him the initial equipment as a first-time bonus. The system congratulated him for choosing compounder as his job, which shocked everyone present. The bald man stuttered in disbelief, asking if he was stupid, and loudly proclaimed that the compounder was the weakest job available. Undeterred, Jinfrey simply smiled and opened his inventory. He believed that whether a compounder was weak or not depended entirely on the player, and his primary goal in hunting 33 creatures was to collect the drop items exclusive to the baptism ritual. The system then revealed his loot: 5 winged centipede tails, 9 winged centipede wings, and 3 vials of winged centipede blood, all of F rarity. The bald man looked on, puzzled by Jinfrey's actions. Jinfrey placed all the drop items along with his normal short sword into the crafting interface. Using his job skill, Compound, which required 12 mana, he began the compounding process. This skill was precisely why he had chosen the compounder job. The other players watched in awe as he skillfully combined the items. Jinfrey knew that the result would be a piece of equipment so powerful, it could fundamentally change the game dynamics. Shortly after, the system confirmed that he had successfully created a new weapon. The system displayed his newly forged sword, named Centipede, with an unknown rank, an attack power of 66, and a durability of 1500. Its first skill, Mind's Eye, dealt triple damage when targeting an enemy's weak point. The second and third skills would unlock under specific conditions. The strength of an adventurer is determined by their level and job skill. Equipment is generally considered just a support item, enhancing attack or defense and nothing more. However, Jinfrey knows that there are cleverly concealed pieces of equipment that defy this norm, items that overwhelmingly enhance the user's strength or defense. Hardcore players refer to items like his centipede as hidden equipment. Later, he arrived at the town of new adventurers, Rogues Begin, and observed people walking around and vendors selling their wares. He was relieved to see that the place resembled the game world. A lady approached and asked if he would like an apple. Moments later, he was eating an apple on the side, satisfied that he had obtained the first hidden equipment just as he planned. However, he pondered his next steps. He knew the objective of the game was straightforward. Across all 7 continents, there existed one S-rank dungeon, and players needed to slay all 7 of the boss monsters residing there. After eating the apple, he decided he needed to get stronger and resolved to start grinding in the dungeons immediately. Although the standard practice was to clear the dungeons in order, starting with the F rank, he proceeded directly to the teleportation portal for the C rank dungeon. His destination was the forest inhabited by the Guardian, a C-rank dungeon, where his mission was to slay the boss monster. Upon entering, the system warned him that he could not level up until the clear condition had been met. He checked his status window, which showed his health at 122, mana at 18 out of 30, strength at 21, defense at 27, intelligence at 30, speed at 19, and luck at 11. Knowing the recommended level for entry was between 17 and 30, he felt the danger of venturing in at level 1. Suddenly, he sensed something behind him. It was a level 17 devil plant, not giving him even a moment's respite. He gripped his sword tightly, positioning it in front of him, aware that one hit could be fatal. The devil plant launched its roots in an attack. He dodged them, relieved that he recognized the attack pattern. He then swung his sword at the devil plant, knowing it was vulnerable after its attack. His strike was a critical hit, triggering his mind's eye sword skill, which effortlessly defeated the devil plant. He was thrilled to have defeated the devil plant in one hit, and the experience points he gained increased his level by 9. As he viewed his status window, he remembered that his health and mana automatically increased with each level up. Additionally, for every level gained, they received 5 skill points, which could be used to enhance any stat of their choice. He chose to allocate all 45 of his skill points to his defense, reasoning that he could deal sufficient damage if he maximized his defensive capabilities. Clutching his centipede sword, he expressed his happiness about both his increased level and improved stats, thanking the weapon for its aid and noting how well things were going. He recognized that the centipede's active skill, Mind's Eye, was extremely useful, and with its 66 attack power, it could likely handle the B-rank dungeon on the first continent. However, he believed the true value of his centipede was yet to be revealed, which made things increasingly interesting. Deciding to target the boss deep within the dungeon while leveling up, he ventured deeper into the forest. There, he was startled to find himself surrounded by 3 level 23 noir snakes, a rare encounter since meeting 3 simultaneously had a less than 1% chance. Suddenly, one of the snakes lunged at him with its mouth open, but he managed to jump away just in time. While noting the snake's ferocious natures, reminiscent of the game, he failed to see another noir snake sneaking up behind him. As it nearly bit him, he swiftly bent backward to dodge. Running away with the snakes in pursuit, he urged himself to remain calm, questioning why he was panicking when he knew their attack patterns and vulnerabilities well. He then leaped towards their necks, the only part he could effectively slash. He believed a one-shot kill was possible if he executed his move correctly. As his centipede neared one noir's neck, another blocked him with its head, indicating they were protecting each other. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain as the third noir bit into his shoulder, splattering his blood. Grimacing in pain and with a trembling hand, he managed to slash the attacking noir's neck with his centipede. The kill awarded him enough experience points to increase his level by 3. As expected, the pain was intense, and the system alerted him that he was in critical condition. Urging him to escape and recover immediately, his health had dropped to 8 out of 169. Yet, he smiled, satisfied with the outcome and knowing it was within his expected range. By boosting his defense to 72 when he reached level 10, he had ensured a second chance for survival. With full health, he wouldn't be one-shotted in this dungeon. Furthermore, the conditions had now been met to unlock the second skill level of his centipede. The system updated to show that his speed had increased to 171. When the noir snakes came close, he swiftly slashed them with his new centipede skill, Divine Excel, which has a passive effect of 10 times speed and activates only when the wearer is on the verge of death. He then successfully defeated the 2 remaining noir snakes and told them, somewhat apologetically, that he just couldn't die yet. He received experience points that increased his level by 4, bringing him to level 17. He watched the dead noir snakes disappear, thinking that at least his level grind was going well for now. He knew that in that situation, treating his wounds should be the norm. But if he recovered his health now, his 10 times speed buff when in a critical state would disappear. He thought he shouldn't waste that speed advantage, and with his experience and knowledge, it was manageable. Standing up, he considered how painful it would be to receive enough damage to enter that state again. He then proceeded deeper and encountered some monsters, which he easily defeated. He smiled, knowing that those weak mobs were a breeze, and decided to convert his 10 times speed to 10 times experience points. He knew it probably wasn't that simple, but he was confident it increased his efficiency. efficiency. He continued walking, thinking it would be fine to keep leveling like this until the boss appeared because he needed to compound an item before the boss fight. And the ingredients he needed were water, thorn grass, strong acidic berry, caterpillar, skull jelly leaves, fresh blood flower, and hariri seed. Suddenly, a monster appeared behind him while he was busy thinking that there were way too many ingredients just to compound a D-rank item. He managed to kill the monster easily, feeling annoyed that they had made it a bit realistic, remembering that the game itself was disliked for that reason. He sighed, frustratedly acknowledging that nothing would change just by complaining. He then decided to collect the materials before encountering the boss. A moment later, he was near the waterfall and gathered some thorn grass and fresh blood flower. He then unearthed something from the ground. It was a strong acidic berry, making him think that things were going well. However, he was surprised when someone asked if it was him. He turned around, wondering who it was, and saw men from the same village as his. One man asked him what the hell he was doing being an adventurer and called him Jinfrey the loser. He addressed the man as Julius and thought that Julius had become an adventurer about 2 to 3 years ago, yet he was still loitering around there. Julius then asked if he was compounding when he saw his weapon and told him it looked like he couldn't even afford new equipment. The man asked Julius if he was his friend, but Julius replied no, stating that they just lived in the same village when they were kids and that Jinfrey was the poorest one in their village, so Jinfrey couldn't be his friend because it would be embarrassing. Julius also tells the man that Jinfrey's father is dead and his mother is sick, bedridden all day, which makes the man think that Jinfrey is a miserable guy. However, he keeps his silence, thinking that Julius is an awful person to meet there. It's true that Jinfrey's father died when he was little, and even now, his sister is looking after his mother, which is why he became an adventurer to earn money. Julius then calls to him, asking if he is listening and tells him that he is telling him his heroic tale right now, but Jinfrey just stares at him. Julius asks him what's with the look and if he wants to get smacked like back then. Julius then grabs his collar, making Jinfrey wonder what he should do there. Just as Julius was about to hit him, they heard a loud roaring sound that made them stop in horror and confusion. The man, looking up stutteringly, tells them that the boss monster, a level 31 Cyclops, had appeared. Julius asks the man what he is doing and shouts at him to run quickly, but he tells Julius that he is being targeted. The Cyclops then raised its weapon and smashed the man to death, leaving Jinfrey stunned in shock and cursing in horror. Julius was on the ground, shaking in fear and shouting as he witnessed his friend die. The Cyclops, with its one-eyed skill, looked in their direction and walked closer to Jinfrey. He was busy thinking that their level gap was dangerous and that if it had a lot of defense, his attacks probably wouldn't go through. The Cyclops then swung its weapon down at the spot where he was standing, but fortunately, he managed to run away. However, the Cyclops looked at him once again, making him realize that he was being targeted, and then the system showed him that with the effect of the one-eyed skill, he could not escape from that battle. He took out his centipede, knowing there was no other way. The Cyclops raised its weapon to attack him again, and he jumped away to dodge it. He knew all of its moves, and with Divine Excel, he had more than enough speed. Julius was shocked to witness him fighting the Cyclops one-on-one, making him wonder if he really was the Jinfrey he knew and what was happening right now. He was running when he realized that running around wouldn't solve anything. When the Cyclops weapon hit the ground, he jumped onto it and ran at full speed to get on the Cyclops. It reached for him with its other hand in anger and tried to grab him, but he managed to jump up to avoid it. He then headed behind it and saw that its nape was fully exposed. He then launched his attack from behind. He then struck its nape, but as he had anticipated, he could hardly damage it. When he pulled his sword out of its nape, the Cyclops felt it and growlingly tried to hit him with its weapon, but he jumped away in time, causing it to smack its own nape. He noticed that it was difficult to fight it on even ground given their level gap. Meanwhile, Julius was hiding under a bush, watching the fight and amazed at Jinfrey's speed in dodging the Cyclops' attacks. Julius wondered what buff Jinfrey was using, as he couldn't see his movements at all. On the other hand, Jinfrey was busy dodging the Cyclops' attacks when he exhaustingly realized that he really needed to create it. He knew that he already had thorn grass, strong acidic berry, and fresh blood flower, so he just needed to find the remaining ingredients. He looked around, knowing that he could find those things there, but then his gaze fell on Julius, who looked confused and was surrounded by the remaining ingredients. Jinfrey then ran in Julius' direction, making Julius shout at him not to come there while he was being chased by the Cyclops. Jinfrey swiftly grabbed the caterpillar, hariri seed, and skull jelly leaves. He then rushed to the water, which was the last ingredient he needed. When he obtained the water, he knew everything was set, so he immediately used his compounding skill, and all the ingredients mixed together. After that, he successfully compounded a poison of E rarity, which poisoned the drinker, decreasing their health every second. Julius saw it and asked him if he was stupid, pointing out that Cyclops are highly resistant to poison and even if he made it drink the poison, the effect wouldn't last. Jinfrey calmly told Julius that he was aware of that. He then grabbed the noir snake's cerebrospinal fluid, which is of C rarity, and the poison he had just made because his goal from the beginning was to compound the poison with the noir snake's CSF. After compounding, he successfully created a strong poison of D rarity, which severely poisoned the drinker, decreasing their health every second. Julius wondered what it was and if it was an item compounded twice. Jinfrey then compounded the strong poison into his centipede sword, shocking Julius, who asked him what he was doing. The system then showed that he had added a poisonous attribute to centipede, but Jinfrey knew that this was the true form of the weapon. Julius, witnessing everything, wondered what was happening and if Jinfrey really had added attributes to his weapon by compounding 3 times. Suddenly, the Cyclops appeared behind Julius, and Jinfrey confidently told the Cyclops that he had kept it waiting, but they should go for round 2. The Cyclops then angrily raised its weapon and swung it in his direction, making water splash everywhere, but fortunately, Jinfrey jumped away in time and speedily moved around the Cyclops, who was trying to hit him. When its weapon hit the ground, Jinfrey jumped to get closer to its head. He then raised his sword while telling it that he knew its entire attack pattern. The Cyclops looked up to see him, but it was too late for the Cyclops because he slashed its nape with his poisonous centipede. It screamed in pain while the system showed that the Cyclops had been severely poisoned and its HP would decrease every second. However, the Cyclops nullified the poison, yet Jinfrey raised his centipede and told it that he would do it as many times as he had to. He then slashed the Cyclops and severely poisoned it again. It screamed in pain and nullified the poison, but he continued to attack it, and it continued to nullify the poison he was inflicting. But a moment later, because of his continuous attacks, the poison spread throughout the Cyclops' body, making it weaker. He thought the poison was the right answer when he saw the Cyclops drool. He then jumped higher to get on its head and decided to finish it. He then pointed his centipede down and pierced the Cyclops' one eye. Thanks to his centipede's mind's eye skill, he dealt a critical hit and brought the Cyclops down to the ground. He then safely landed on the ground as the Cyclops' body fell, while the system showed that he had defeated the Cyclops and earned experience points. Julius, who was still hiding, couldn't believe it and wondered if it was serious that the man in front of him was really Jinfrey. He then glanced at Julius, making him jump in shock and run away, fearing that he might be attacked next. Jinfrey put his centipede back in his inventory, thinking that things had somehow worked out. He then called up his status, and the system showed that his level had increased by 23. His speed was currently buffed, and his status was critical. He was glad that his level had gone up a bit and decided to think about his unused skill points later. He then opened his inventory, and the system showed that he had received 350,000 gold as a reward for subjugating the dungeon boss and obtained a Cyclops Fang, which was of D rarity. He was pleased that he had earned quite a lot of gold from the boss subjugation and was excited to send the gold to his mother. He then clicked through the system, knowing that one of the biggest advantages of playing solo was being able to collect all the rewards. He then saw the reward material, a Cyclops eyeball of C rarity, a somewhat grotesque looking item. It could also be sold for a decent price. He closed the system, deciding to ignore its appearance, knowing that with it, he had obtained one of the materials he needed for the next hidden equipment. Later, he arrived at a flat plain D-rank dungeon, and as he looked around, he felt nostalgic. He knew that the final goal of the game was to defeat the demon god on all 7 continents, starting from the first one on this continent. For that, he needed to find the second hidden equipment from this place. He took out his centipede, thinking that to solve the trial at the fallen goddess's statue, he needed the Cyclops' eyeball and one more material, which was why he had come there. The monsters growled at him when they saw him, and when they rushed at him, he immediately slashed them, knowing that he needed to grind some levels too, with the ultimate aim of defeating all the demon gods and creating a peaceful world, free from any monsters. He then thought about how much money he would make, enough for his family to lead a good life and to silence all those villagers who looked down on him. He knew that he just needed to get stronger, and with that, he could achieve everything. After killing the monsters, his level increased once more. Meanwhile, a reporter delivers today's adventure news from the Adventurer Association and tells everyone that yesterday, a new adventurer defeated 33 creatures at the baptism ceremony, setting an unprecedented record that has become a hot topic within the association. Additionally, according to more detailed information, the name of the new adventurer is Jinfrey Van Raid, described as a black-haired man with blue eyes, who is headed for the town of beginnings. In the D dungeon, Jinfrey was busy fighting monsters, unaware of the news. He looked around, puzzled because he had been searching for a while yet couldn't find what he was looking for. He knew he had already gathered various materials, but he still needed the cobalt bird feathers. Although the cobalt bird itself isn't a rare monster, there are a total of 7 dungeons on one continent. Among them, 6 are ranked from F to A, and the 7th, where the demon god resides, is ranked as the largest spawn rate for the cobalt bird should have been in the D-ranked dungeon on the first continent, which is where he was, but he couldn't find anything. Resigned, he put his centipede back into his inventory, guessing that he'd go back to the city first to try to find some information on it. Hours later, he was back in the city and he was certain there was a general store around there. He found one, and just as he approached the door, he heard something being crushed inside and someone shouting. A man then came out laughing and told his men that they should scram. One of the men pushed Jinfrey aside as they walked away, happily shouting that they had caught another big fish, making him wonder if it was a robbery. The men were walking toward the stairs where a mother and her child were descending. When the mother looked back, one of the men pushed the child to get out of their way, and the child fell toward the stairs. Her mother shouted in worry and panic, but fortunately, Jinfrey caught the child in time before she could land badly on the stairs. He then glared at the men, particularly the leader, who was running away. The child ran to her mother, crying in fear, while her mother thanked him, to which he replied that it was nothing. While the mother comforted her scared child, the men continued to run away. Suddenly, the man beside him angrily said that those men were damned mountain dogs. Assuming the man was probably the store owner, Jinfrey asked what he meant by mountain dogs. The owner replied that those men were from the Mountain Dog Guild, a group of thieves and poachers who had recently made that area their territory. Jinfrey couldn't believe that such a guild existed, and the shop owner mentioned that the recent overhunting of the cobalt bird was also their doing, which surprised him as he was currently gathering information and getting stumped. He then realized that the mountain dogs were to blame. The shop owner frustratingly told him that those men didn't care whether they harmed ordinary people, women, or children, and that they were the worst. He sighed and said that it looked like he needed to close his shop for a while. The shop owner then walked back to his shop, and the mother and child walked away. Jinfrey thought about the Mountain Dog Guild and realized it was a hassle because he knew that a guild was basically a gathering of adventurers with the same ideology, and even he didn't want to mess with a guild by himself. However, when he figured out that they caused trouble to others, his anger rate rose by 10%, and learning they were overhunting cobalt birds, his anger spiked by 90%, which fumed him completely. He then decided to chase after them. A moment later, he arrived at an alley full of destroyed things and trash. He peeked around the corner of the wall and saw the men enjoying themselves. The leader told his men that it looked like they had cleaned out most of the shops in the area, to which one of the men agreed and mentioned that their boss had told them that they should move on. Jinfrey noticed that they were carrying their loot and wondered where the cobalt bird feathers were. He looked around at the men's loot and spotted a jar in one of the boxes. Inside, he found the feathers and realized that they were the ones who had hunted the birds to oblivion. The leader then asked if they had watched the adventurer news, and one of the men questioned what they meant by 33 and if it wasn't crazy. The leader told his men that the news was probably lying and it was just fake news, which they all agreed upon while Jinfrey, not listening to them, was busy thinking that there were a lot of them, making him wonder what he should do. Suddenly, someone called out from behind and asked him what the hell he was doing there. He looked back and saw a man pointing a knife at him, making him guess that it was probably a thief's skill, covert, that he hadn't even sensed their presence until now. He laughingly raised both of his hands and told the man that he was not suspicious, but the man questioned him, asking if he was going to claim that he was just a non-suspicious person who had gotten lost in the streets. The man then told him that they had already killed a spy from another guild who had spouted the same nonsense a while back, which made Jinfrey look away in guilt. Suddenly, the man swung his knife at him, but Jinfrey jumped away in time to avoid it. He thought it was way too sudden and grabbed his centipede, guessing that there was no helping it. When he dodged the man's second attack, Jinfrey tripped him, and as the man was about to fall, Jinfrey hit him with the handle of his centipede from behind, making the man collapse to the ground. The other men heard the noise and wondered what it was. Unfortunately, one of the men saw him and shouted that there was someone there. The leader asked if it was another guild spy, but Jinfrey told them to wait and that he had no intention of fighting them because he just needed some cobalt bird feathers. He then raised both of his hands in the air, but then noticed that he was still holding his centipede, making him realize that no matter how they saw it, they would think he was the one who attacked their man. He admitted to himself that he was a fool for trying to talk it out with them. The leader noticed that he had knocked out their guard and ordered the men to kill him. Frustrated, Jinfrey told them that if he couldn't talk it out, he guessed he'd just have to take them by force. The bandits slowly approached him, and one of them launched an attack. He easily dodged it by pushing the man's arm aside and hitting the man's face with the flat side of his sword, causing the man to bleed and shout that his nose had been sliced. Calmly, he told the man that he had only been hit with the flat side of the sword and questioned his reaction, as he was only trying to rile them up. He mentioned that dealing with a guild usually turns into a one versus many situation, which is a hassle. Just then, another man appeared behind him, shouting for him to die. He bent down to dodge the attack and kicked the man, who still managed to launch his spear at him. He grabbed the spear, pulled the man closer, and hit his stomach with the sword handle. He was surprised when the system showed him that he had dealt a critical hit, and the skill Mind's Eye had been activated. The man rolled on the ground in pain while he apologized, guessing it must have hurt. Another bandit appeared, ready to strike with an axe, but he bent down in time to avoid it and struck the man's chin with the sword handle, pushing him back and causing him to scream in pain. He told them to cut him some slack because he didn't actually want to fight, and they were reaping what they sowed. He then looked around for the cobalt bird feather, not noticing a man behind him. He felt someone close and managed to block an attack from behind just in time. He then saw another bandit who taunted him for leaving his back open, realizing it was Covert, the same guy from earlier. They pushed each other, and the man introduced himself as the submaster of that guild, Masuo. Masuo asked him if he was right that he had heard his name before, but he replied that it was his first time hearing it. He then asked Masuo if he didn't find it embarrassing to introduce himself with that name, making Masuo furious and shout that some things are better left unsaid. Masuo then charged at him, shouting that he remembered him as the one they thrusted back in the city, and that they should have killed him back then. He easily blocked the attack, taunting Masuo about using shoddy weapons and asking if he wasn't a thief. Masuo teasingly told him to keep yapping, saying that although he might know how to swing, he probably just lucked out with his weapon. As Masuo continuously attacked him, he mentioned that sometimes they are all adventurers with jobs, meaning equipment is just decoration, and real power comes from developing their job skills. He asked Masuo if that was so. Masuo then forcefully attacked him, but he fortunately jumped to the side to avoid it. Masuo called him a disrespectful twat and told him he could tell he was just a rookie from his equipment. He pointed out that his armor was the one given in the tutorial when he selected Compounder, yet his weapon screamed high rarity. He accused him of using that weapon to put on such bravado, but he kept his silence. Masuo then released a flurry of knives, arrogantly noting that it looked like his first time fighting an adventurer. Masuo aimed and threw the knives, but he easily blocked them. Masuo told him that in a battle between adventurers, if one's job is known to the opponent, it puts them at an overwhelming disadvantage. As a compounder, the only skill he could use was compound, meaning all he had to focus on was the movement of his sword. Masuo then asked him about his own job, saying he couldn't determine what skill he might use. He confusedly asked Masuo if he was right that he was a thief, pointing out that the only job that could use covert was a thief. Masuo was shocked and shouted that he was a summoner, which he awkwardly agreed to, starting to feel sorry for Masuo. However, he knew he had to consider whether Masuo had learned plunder as a skill. If his centipede got swiped by Masuo's plunder, it would be no joke. So, he decided to end it quickly. He rushed at Masuo, ready to attack with his sword. But then two bandits appeared behind him, shocking him. They rushed to attack from behind, revealing they were also using covert. He managed to dodge their attacks and composed himself, unaware that he had struck someone from behind with his sword handle. He looked back and saw that he had hit Masuo directly in a sensitive area. The system then showed him that he had dealt a super critical hit, activating his mind's eye skill. Masuo was stunned for a moment before screaming loudly in pain and collapsing on the ground. The other bandits shouted for Masuo to stay with them, realizing the gravity of the situation. He admitted it was his bad luck that he even got a super critical. He then approached the bandits and told them it looked like the match was over. He warned them that if they didn't want to end up like Masuo, they should give him the cobalt bird feathers, making them scream and cry in fear. One of the bandits stutteringly asked if he said cobalt bird feathers and promised to bring them immediately. However, other bandits arrived, shouting that he had been knocking their people out and was probably from an enemy guild, much to the relief of the two bandits in front of him. He was surprised to see the whole thief guild, thinking they sure popped out like some damn hornets. The bandits surrounded him, and one of them remarked that he had guts messing around with the Mountain Dog Guild. Another asked if they seriously called everyone there for one guy, but then they saw the submaster collapsed on the ground and panicked, asking what happened to Masuo. They looked closer and noticed that their submaster was completely out cold. They began questioning if they were saying Jinri beat their submaster, but others couldn't believe it because they were talking about their submaster. They speculated that Masuo probably drank too much and that guy was smacking him while he was drunk, implying Jinri was a cheap bastard. Jinri knew that Masuo wasn't actually drunk, but certainly drunk on his meager power. Suddenly, someone asked what all the fuss was about, shocking the bandits. They saw a huge man walking closer, their guild master. The bandits rushed to report what happened, while Jinri looked silently at the guild master, betting his name was Guild Masuo. The guild master asked his men if it meant someone came there and picked a fight with their guild, to which they replied yes. The bandits then pointed at their submaster and told the guild master that even their submaster got handled. The guildmaster stared at Jinri for a moment, and Jinri stared back. The guildmaster then confirmed it and asked Jinri which guild he was from, but Jinri replied that he was solo and not in any guild. The guildmaster asked if he meant he did it all by himself, and Jinri confirmed. The guildmaster laughed loudly and told him he liked him, offering to let him join their guild. Jinri was stunned and confused, and the bandits looked at their master, equally confused. The guild master explained that normally he'd make him regret putting his hands on their guild. But since he defeated Masuo, he wasn't bad, so he offered him a place in the guild. The master put his hand on Jinri's shoulder, calling him homeboy and asking if he was so happy he couldn't speak, suggesting they share some drinks first. Jinri, however, refused and pushed the guild master's hand away from his shoulder. He then told the guild master that he was only there for the cobalt bird feathers and a little bit of revenge for the general store and the little girl. He asked the guild master who would want to join his mess of a guild and demanded that they bring him the cobalt bird feathers, stunning the guild master and causing the bandits to panic. The guild master asked if he heard that right, to which he confidently replied yes, adding that they were a shitty guild that only targeted the weak, truly a mess. Enraged, the guild master raised his huge axe and attacked, causing the ground to shatter, but Jinri fortunately dodged it. The guild master lifted his axe again, stating that he had changed his mind. Pointing at Jinri, he declared that it was the first time he had met someone so impudent, so he would rough him up and turn him into his slave. Jinri noticed that the man wasn't a thief due to his attack power. He jumped away to avoid the guild master's attack, pushed himself sideways on the ground to dodge the next strike, then backflipped to face the guild master, creating distance. He knew it would be a hassle if the guild master started using his job skill, so he needed to beat him quickly. Rushing to the guild master, he attempted to slash his head off. The guild master bent down to avoid the attack and countered with surprising speed. Jinri successfully hit the guild master from the side with his sword handle, causing him pain. The guild master noticed that Jinri was swinging with the flat side of the sword, but he sure hit hard, so he should avoid taking his attacks head on. Jinri, surprised, noticed the guild master's toughness. The guild master then unequipped his axe and put it back in his inventory, confusing Jinri. Wondering why he unequipped his weapon, Jinri watched as the guild master activated his in-fight skill and showcased his fighter passive skill, which doubled his physical stats for 3 minutes upon unequipping a weapon. The bandits cheered for their master as Jinri realized the guild master was a fighter. The guild master then launched his fist at Jinri, who ran to the side at speed, causing the guild master to hit the wall behind him instead. Jinri knew he'd probably explode in one blow if he got hit, but was surprised when the guild master appeared in front of him with incredible speed, ready to punch again. The guild master launched his fist at Jinri, shouting for him to die, but Jinri calmly raised his sword, waiting for the fist to get closer. He then hit the guild master hard in the stomach with his sword handle, dealing a critical hit while dodging the guild master's attack at the same time. The guild master screamed in pain, shocking his guild members. He then slammed to the ground, causing the members to panic as he had defeated their guild master. One of them noticed that he was the new adventurer who was in the news because of his black hair and blue eyes. He looked at them, confirming their suspicions that he was the man in the news. The bandits shouted that they were not mistaken, calling him the blue-eyed Jinri, which confused him. When he called out to them, they jumped in shock but then ran away in fear, surprising him. He wondered how they knew his name and why they left their guild master behind. He decided not to dwell on it, focusing instead on finding the cobalt bird feathers and returning the treasures in the warehouse to the store. Later, he was in Sigrun Fall's B-rank dungeon, walking out in surprise that the boss battle had ended in an instant. The system showed that he had defeated the boss monster, Baphomet, which was level 35, and received experience points. He walked closer to the fallen goddess statue, stopping when he was near. He then told it that he had missed it. He knew that by solving the mechanism of the goddess statue, he could obtain the second hidden equipment. He took out the Cyclops Eye and the Cobalt Feather from his inventory for their touching reunion. A person with good intuition would know at a glance that there was a trick in the eye of the stone statue, and a few people had noticed that the left eye socket could be fitted with the Cyclops Eye. However, as far as Jinri knew, no one had noticed the gap in the wings on its back that was the size of a single feather. When he finished placing the Cobalt Feather, the system showed that the wish of the fallen goddess's statue had been fulfilled. The statue then lit up, and tears fell from the goddess's eyes, which the system showed as tears of joy. The goddess's tears then poured into a gold cup, which released the second hidden equipment. The system showed that it was Lucifer's Halo, with an unknown rank, 100 luck, and 2000 durability. Its skill 1 was mind reading, which read other people's emotions and thoughts. Skill 2 was magic perception, which sensed the magical power of adventurers and monsters within a 5 kilometers radius. Skill 3 was still unknown until certain conditions were met. He was sure that with such a powerful function, it made sense that it was so hard to get. He looked up at the fallen goddess statue and told her that he'd put Lucifer's halo to good use, which made the goddess smile without him noticing because he was busy equipping it right away. He then placed the ring above his head, worried because it made him look like a spirit or something. He was annoyed because he didn't really want to stand out too much, but he thought people wouldn't think it was broken equipment based on its appearance. He smiled, thinking that now he had obtained Lucifer's halo, he could tackle the S-rank dungeon. A moment later, he arrived at the Adventurer Guild and was frustrated to see that the only S-rank available was the Agni Volcano dungeon. Due to its danger, only a party of 7 or more people was allowed to enter. He was frustrated because there was no recruitment for members at the moment. He knew that when the boss monster residing in an S-rank dungeon was defeated, the whole dungeon disappeared, but after a while, it would randomly respawn in a different place on the same continent. Additionally, by defeating the first demon god, they would receive a title allowing them to go to the second continent. Eager to reach the next continent as soon as possible, he then heard other adventurers shouting that they saw Freyna the Flame Magician's party, which caught his attention. Looking where they were pointing, he saw a guild resting nearby and a lady named Freyna Ashbury, who was 23 years old, level 45, and a magician. His Lucifer's halo activated, using its skill 1, mind reading. He sensed her desire, and the system showed him that Freyna wanted to challenge the S-rank dungeon as soon as possible but faced a problem due to a lack of members. He smiled, knowing it was good timing and glad that Lucifer's halo came in handy right away. Freyna then told the man in front of her that it was decided, and the man responded that they should disperse for today. He approached them and asked if he could join their party, but they didn't answer, focusing on his Lucifer's halo. Frustrated, he realized that even without the skill, he could guess what they thought of him. One of the men told him that after discussing it, they had come to the conclusion to give up for now and suggested he hit up someone else if he needed a party. He used his mind-reading skill and sensed compassion from the man. The system showed him that the man was thinking about an injured party member who was in the hospital. Understanding their situation, he faced Freyna and said he would like to hear the opinion of the leader. He then told her that she looked a bit anxious in his eyes and asked if she had something urgent to do in the S-rank dungeon. She replied that it was none of his business, yet he sensed anxiety in her and realized she was worried about her father, an adventurer who hadn't returned from the S-rank dungeon for over a month. He sensed another wave of anxiety and, when the system showed it to him, he kicked it in anger because it revealed that Freyna was looking at the halo above his head, thinking there was something wrong with him. He then apologized for his late introduction and introduced himself as Jinri. He told them that he also wanted to enter the S-rank dungeon as soon as possible. Freyna wondered where she had heard his name before, and the man next to her remembered it, asking if he was the one mentioned in the news, the one who defeated 33 monsters at the baptismal altar. He couldn't believe it was Jinri because he looked weak. Jinri realized he had made the news and understood that the system revealed everything about him. Freyna felt a bit off about him, noticing that it seemed like he was reading her mind. Despite this, she didn't think she was influenced by the news. She sensed that he had an atmosphere different from other adventurers around, as if he had already been through a lot. Jinri sensed an awe feeling in Freyna and saw that she felt a strange awe in his presence, making him think things were looking up. She then told him that she understood and would let him join their party, shocking her other members. She stood up and told him that if he was useless, they would leave him behind. He just smiled in response, knowing that everything went well and that he could finally go to the S-rank dungeon. A moment later, they entered the S-rank dungeon Agni Volcano. Jinri was busy thinking about his position in the party as the vanguard, the most dangerous position in an emergency, making him think that Freyna, the captain of the party, was quite ruthless. One of the men whispered to Freyna, asking if it was really okay to put Jinri in their party and expressing his lack of trust in him. She replied that there was no problem. If Jinri was useful, great, and if not, he could be their bait. Another man approached Jinri and asked if he was really the guy in the news. Jinri replied that he guessed it was him since he hadn't heard the news directly, making the man stare at him. The system showed that he sensed distrust because the man named Arthur didn't believe him, making Jinri realize that Arthur was really skeptical. Another man then remarked that it was obviously a lie, asking if Arthur thought Jinri was strong just because he wore an angel's halo. Jinri was frustrated, thinking they should leave his halo alone, knowing that despite its appearance, it was a completely busted piece of equipment. He was then surprised when the system showed that skill 2 of the halo, Magic Perception, had been activated and an unknown magical power movement had been detected. He couldn't believe that the monsters near the summit had all started coming down at the same time. He immediately shouted at them to shield the user and use their skills to cover everyone. The man was confused, but Jinri urged them to be quick because it was going to start erupting. The man was about to scold him for his tone, but then the volcano exploded, shocking everyone. Jinri shouted for them to guard themselves as flaming stones headed their way. They gathered together and protected the user, with one of the men raising his hands and using Reflect Guard to shield everyone from the molten boulders. Jinri noticed it was raining molten boulders, meaning they couldn't move until it finished. Freyna then ordered them to stand by and wait. She walked forward, raised her wand, and cast Meteorite Blaze. She swung her wand forward, and the Meteorite Blaze moved in the direction of her wand, dissolving every molten boulder coming their way. Everyone was in shock and amazement, but Jinri knew she had used her magic to vaporize the volcanic rocks. Then the ground split and shook, shocking everyone. Arthur shouted as the ground beneath him split, and he fell. Fortunately, Jinri grabbed his hand in time, saving him from falling into the depths. Unfortunately, the ground he was holding onto collapsed, causing him to panic. With no choice, he fell with Arthur into the depths, knowing the height was bad news for them. But just as they were close to the ground, they landed on a cotton bat, level 38, which saved them. He sighed and told Arthur that it was a cotton bat and they were saved, guessing it was probably because of his 100 luck from the halo. But then the cotton bat looked back in anger, sensing them, which made Jinri panic. He told Arthur they should jump down. They jumped away and faced the bat. Jinri explained that it absorbs impacts and launches them as counterattacks, so the impact of their fall would probably get amplified several times, and they needed to be careful. Arthur stutteringly replied that he didn't need to be told that. Jinri shouted to Arthur that it was coming. Arthur was stunned in shock when he saw it approaching. Jinri immediately moved, grabbed Arthur, and dodged the huge rocks thrown at them. Pushing Arthur to safety, Jinri reminded him to be careful and warned that if he didn't want to die, he should stay put. Jinri then faced the cotton bat. Arthur looked back at where he had been standing, realizing that if Jinri hadn't pushed him away, he would have been crushed. Arthur couldn't believe the cotton bat's destructive power for a normal monster and understood that they were in an S-rank battlefield. He was even more shocked when he saw Jinri easily slash the cotton bat in half, wondering what had just happened and if Jinri really defeated it in one hit. Meanwhile, Freyna cast her dowsing skills. A man asked if she had found anything, to which she replied that Arthur was still alive, making everyone happy. She couldn't believe Jinri had fallen while trying to save Arthur and noted that he had detected the eruption faster than anyone. One of the men suggested they also go down, but she disagreed. She explained that searching for Arthur would drain their energy before the battle with the demon god, and their objective was to defeat the demon god and bring peace to the continent, even if it was just momentary. She reminded them that they were aiming for the same summit and that if they just proceeded forward, they were bound to regroup. She assured them not to worry because Arthur was her brother and she had taught him herself. However, she was secretly begging Arthur to make it to the top safely and hoping her father was safe too. On the other hand, after Arthur explained everything, Jinri asked if Freyna was his sister, realizing Arthur was also searching for his missing father. Jinri then told Arthur he had calmed down and was going to start moving, shocking Arthur, who followed him while stutteringly asking where he was going when the demon god was at the summit. Jinri asked Arthur if he wanted to challenge the demon god at his level, warning him that he would die if he did. He explained that he was going to do a bit of hunting down below. The system showed that Arthur was feeling conflicted and also wanted to get stronger, so Jinri told him he should come along if he wanted to get stronger. A moment later, they were both deeper into the dungeon, and Arthur awkwardly laughed when he saw flame bone birds, which were level 41 to 42. Arthur then asked Jinri what he meant by a bit of hunting. Arthur noticed that the flame bone birds were higher level than the cotton bat from earlier. He thought that if it were one-on-one, they might stand a chance, but against so many, it seemed impossible. However, he was shocked when Jinri moved forward and started slashing and killing the flame bone birds effortlessly. Arthur realized Jinri was strong but didn't notice a flame bone bird launching an attack from behind. Fortunately, Arthur felt it in time and jumped away before being grilled to death. Arthur then grabbed his knife, but the bird flew up and launched down to attack him again. Knowing he couldn't let it get close, he took out his bow and arrow, aiming at the bird. When the distance was right, he released the arrow, successfully piercing the flame bone bird's head and killing it. Exhausted, he told the bird not to look down on him because he wouldn't lose in a one-on-one fight. He then remembered Jinri and looked at him worriedly, but Arthur was shocked to see Jinri sitting in the middle of a swarm of dead flame bone birds. Jinri looked at Arthur and asked if he was done, all while chewing on food. Arthur was stunned and realized Jinri was eating the dropped item, flame bone bird meat, which tasted like fried chicken. Although it could be eaten as is, it would taste better after reheating. While Arthur was behind him, wondering what he was doing, Jinri felt sick from eating too fast. He knew he needed to eat 50 of those to get a buff. The system then showed Jinri that a large amount of mana was heading their way, surprising him. He immediately looked back, food still in his mouth, and stood up in shock when he saw a salamander, level 45, the mid-boss of Agni Volcano. He broke into a sweat, not just from fear but because of his upset stomach, which caused all his stats to decrease by 30%. After vomiting, Jinri warned Arthur to be careful, explaining that the salamander was a subspecies that had higher stats from eating a human. Suddenly, the salamander swung its tail and hit Arthur, slamming him against the wall. Jinri worriedly asked Arthur if he was alright. Arthur spat out blood and replied that he was fine. Jinri told Arthur he'd take care of it and that he should hide somewhere safe. Facing the salivating salamander, Jinri noticed its sluggish movements and asked if it was having a stomach ache too, suggesting it had just eaten. Jinri noticed the salamander was shaking, making him wonder if it was going to throw up, which it did, expelling a lot of waste. He saw human bones and accessories among the vomit, which he had expected. However, Arthur was stunned and horrified when he saw a sword and shattered clothes among the debris, recognizing them as his father's. Jinri told the salamander they should settle things before they both barfed again, which it seemed to agree with. Arthur, shaking, grabbed the sword and clothes, sensing a vengeful heart from Arthur. The system showed Jinri that Arthur had intense murderous intent towards the salamander. He looked back in confusion and saw Arthur seriously telling the salamander it was dead meat. Arthur then drew his knife, launching at the salamander and shouting that it was for his father, drawing the salamander's attention. Jinri shouted for Arthur to stop and calm down, but Arthur didn't listen. The salamander hit him with its tail, throwing him back. Arthur stood up and told it he would rip it to pieces. He launched again, but Jinri pinned him down, shouting and asking if he was deaf because he had told him to stop. Arthur shouted for Jinri to shut up and let him go. Jinri reminded Arthur that he was really going to die and that salamanders weren't something people hunted solo. Arthur arrogantly asked so what and told Jinri to get off him. Jinri shouted for Arthur to calm down for a second and asked what would happen to the rest of their family if he also ended up dead, which stopped Arthur in his tracks. Jinri told Arthur that he knew the salamander wasn't something he could beat alone. Arthur, tearing up, replied that he knew it but asked what else he was supposed to do when his father's belongings came out of the salamander. Jinri saw Arthur cry and the system showed him Arthur's anger and powerlessness, his fists tightening. Jinri let go of him and apologized for yelling. He then seriously addressed Arthur, asking if his job was a hunter and if he could use the battle cry skill. He asked Arthur what was in his inventory, confusing Arthur, who replied that he had some healing herbs, a bow, arrows, and cotton bat's fluff. Arthur didn't know why cotton bat's fluff was in his inventory. Jinri explained that it was from the hunter's hidden ability and told him it looked like he had some good stuff. Arthur asked what he meant by hidden ability, but Jinri told him they would talk about it later. He instructed Arthur to listen closely because he had a plan. If things went well, they should be able to defeat the salamander. After explaining the plan to Arthur, Jinri told him they should proceed as discussed. Arthur agreed, thinking they could defeat the salamander together. Arthur stared at the salamander in anger while Jinri stepped closer to it. Jinri instructed Arthur to buff him, and Arthur agreed, calling upon the spirits within his words to arise and lead Jinri to victory. Arthur then used Battle Cry, and the system showed that Jinri received a boost from Arthur's skill, invigorating him for 5 minutes and increasing his strength and speed by 30%. The salamander, sensing this, was shocked. Arthur then handed Jinri the cotton bat's fluff he had asked for. Jinri thanked him and mentioned that the battle cry skill had made his stomach feel much better. He reminded Arthur to stick to the plan. Jinri then charged at the salamander at high speed. The salamander noticed and waited for him to get closer. Jinri knew it had a lot of health points, so the standard procedure usually involved attacks from a large number of players. He slashed the salamander with his centipede sword, heavily poisoning it and making it scream in pain. He smiled, knowing he had used the centipede's poison effectively. An arrow then hit the salamander in the head. He looked back and saw that Arthur had shot it, just as they had planned, aiming for the salamander's weak point between its eyebrows. Jinri saw Arthur taking out another arrow and aiming at the salamander. He appreciated that Arthur's long-range attacks would help while he attacked in close range with his centipede sword. Together, they continuously attacked the salamander, weakening it within minutes, but Jinri knew the real challenge was just beginning. The salamander then changed into its berserk mode, increasing all its stats by 30%. Arthur covered his face, unable to believe the strength of the berserk mode, feeling the heat wave even from a distance. Despite this, Jinri ran closer to attack, knowing the salamander's stats had increased but deciding to take advantage of the situation by gripping the cotton bat fluff tightly. The salamander launched an attack, and Jinri met it in the middle with the cotton bat fluff in front. He smiled, knowing the preparations were complete. In berserk mode, the salamander's weak point had shifted from between its eyebrows to its front leg. Arthur aimed and released an arrow, successfully hitting the new weak point. Simultaneously, Jinri slashed the other front leg, making the salamander scream in pain. They continued attacking the salamander together without stopping until it lowered to the ground, surprising Arthur. They both noticed it had become slower and had stopped attacking. Jinri walked closer to check and saw that the flames surrounding its body had weakened, indicating it was in a critical state. However, he knew it could regenerate its health points by swallowing the surrounding flames. The system then showed him that the salamander was in regeneration mode and recovering its health points. Arthur realized that if they didn't act quickly, they wouldn't be able to defeat it within the 5-minute window of the battle cry buff. Arthur confidently aimed his arrow and shouted to Jinri that he was ready. Jinri faced the regenerating salamander and affirmed Arthur's readiness. He then shouted to the salamander that it was time to end it. As Jinri ran closer, the salamander launched a counter-attack, but he shouted for it to open its mouth. He managed to slash its neck, making it scream in pain and open its mouth in the process. Jinri then grabbed the cotton bat fluff and threw it up, shouting to Arthur not to miss. The cotton bat fluff flew down near the salamander's open mouth. Arthur aimed his arrow and confidently replied that he wouldn't miss. Arthur released his arrow, watching it fly in fear. Fortunately, it hit the cotton bat fluff, which flew directly inside the salamander's mouth. Arthur was initially confused when there was no immediate reaction, fearing their mission had failed. However, Jinri began to count down, starting to 3. When he hit 1, the cotton bat fluff exploded inside the salamander's body, causing its head to shatter into pieces. Jinri knew that cotton bat fluff had hidden effects that absorbed attacks and reflected them with triple the original power. The system then showed him that the buff effects from Battle Cry had disappeared, and he had recovered from his upset stomach, making him glad because it had been close. The salamander's body, which had been standing firm, fell to the ground. The system showed that he had defeated the salamander, awarding him experience points. Jinri simply stated that the subjugation was complete. A moment later, they were out of the deep ground, and he saw Arthur hugging his father's sword in silence. Jinri removed his halo, and then Freyna and the others called out to Arthur. She rushed to him in worry, asking if he was alright, but then she noticed the sword Arthur was holding and confirmed it was their father's. Arthur shakily explained that he found it inside the salamander's stomach along with their father's clothes. Freyna hugged Arthur, telling him she was glad he was safe and assuring him he had done everything he could, so he should rest assured. But Arthur cried in pain, saying it wasn't him, it was Jinri who did it. They all looked at Jinri, seeing him digging on the ground with his bare hands. One of the men asked if Jinri was making a grave, which they all agreed upon as they stared at him. They then approached him and helped him dig. The siblings noticed they were making a grave, and after finishing it, they both told their father to rest in peace, kneeling in front of the grave and praying while Jinri watched from the side. He stared at the siblings and remembered their mother calling them and telling them about their father, making them panic. He snapped back to reality when someone called his name. It was Freyna expressing her gratitude for saving Arthur and avenging their father. She thanked him, but he replied that he didn't do much and that Arthur was safe because of his own capability. Arthur, however, replied that he wasn't so stupid as to not know his limits and that his survival and the defeat of the salamander were all because of Jinri. He told him the rumors downplayed his strength. Jinri was much stronger. Everyone then confirmed that Jinri was indeed the one in the news, but he told them to stop talking about him. He pointed out that the real culprit behind it all was standing at the top, the demon god who controlled the monsters on that continent, Helmberos. Freyna furiously swore that she'd turn Helmberos to ashes, and they headed to the top of the volcano. They encountered various monsters along the way but easily defeated them. Hours later, they finally arrived at the Agni volcano summit and looked around, wondering where the boss was. Suddenly, they heard a loud growl, and the volcano itself seemed to rise. They were all horrified and stunned when they saw Helmberos, the boss, which was level 50 with a trait of scorching heat wave. Helmberos screamed with its 3 mouths together, making them cover their ears in pain from the powerful roar and pressure. Helmberos then laughed and asked if they were there to die. Jinri ordered them to retreat, predicting its first move would be a breath attack, which shocked Arthur. Freyna noticed that Helmberos was gathering fire in its middle head, so she shouted for everyone to follow Jinri's instructions and retreat out of range. They all rushed away, but she stopped when she noticed Jinri wasn't moving and shouted to him, asking what he was doing. Jinri simply looked back while Helmberos released a strong breath attack aimed at him. The man protected everyone with his shield, but they all felt the intense heat wave even from a distance. Arthur worriedly called out to Jinri and looked back to where he had been standing. Helmberos' third head teasingly asked if Jinri had faced the attack head-on because he failed to escape. The middle head replied that with that much heat, not even Jinri's ashes would remain, and the first head called Jinri a foolish human. The party was stunned, horrified at the thought that Jinri had really vanished. But Helmberos was surprised and confused when it saw a figure still standing in front of it. Helmberos couldn't believe that Jinri was standing uninjured despite the intense heat. Jinri, smiling, told Helmberos that the attack was lukewarm. The system showed that the fire resistance effect from flame bone bird meat had been activated, making Helmberos think Jinri was interesting. Jinfrey teased Helmberos, remarking that all its efforts hadn't even made him break a sweat. Everyone stared in shock, unable to believe he was still alive. Arthur, overjoyed, called out his name. Freyna, however, wondered how he managed to survive such an attack, knowing that without fire resistance, the heat would have melted him instantly. Meanwhile, Jinfrey smiled to himself, reflecting that all his hardship and preparation had finally paid off. By consuming 50 pieces of flame bone bird meat, he had gained 7 minutes of fire resistance. However, the effect didn't completely nullify the damage. His health had continued to decrease during the attack. The system displayed a warning that his status was critical, but it also showed that he could now activate his Godspeed skill. Seizing the moment, he summoned his centipede sword and activated the skill, which increased his speed by 310%. Helmbarrows grinned menacingly, acknowledging that the human before him had more resolve than most. Amused, it admitted that it would enjoy this fight. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble as Helmbarrows unleashed a powerful scorching heatwave. The intense energy radiated outward, overwhelming everyone it touched. Arthur, reeling from the impact, shouted in alarm as the system alerted the group that they had suffered the abnormal status burn. This condition caused their health to drain rapidly, leaving the party in shock. Freyna quickly shouted instructions, urging her team to take cover behind nearby boulders, warning them that the heat wave could penetrate their equipment. The team scrambled to safety. As she assessed the situation, Freyna realized with frustration that despite their gear being specifically designed for volcanic conditions, Helmbarrows had rendered it useless with a single skill. Her concern deepened as she noticed Jinfrey standing unfazed in the midst of the heat and flames. Arthur, glancing at him, couldn't help but wonder how Jinfrey was withstanding it all. Jinfrey then taunted Helmbarrows, asking if it was done with its warm-up. He mockingly referred to it as a useless dog, standing firm as his fire resistance negated the burn effect. Helmbarrows narrowed its eyes, acknowledging that Jinfrey was unlike the other humans. It warned him not to let his ability to handle the heat make him overconfident. With that, Helmbarrows sank back into the molten lava, but before submerging completely, it promised to show Jinfrey that his arrogance was nothing more than reckless bravado. As Helmbarrows disappeared beneath the surface, the ground stopped shaking. The group watched anxiously, unsure of what would happen next. Jinfrey, standing resolute, raised his centipede sword and prepared for battle. He analyzed the situation carefully, deducing that the real danger lay in Helmbarrows' special skill. Determined, he braced himself for the next attack, knowing that the fight was far from over. Helmbarrows suddenly burst out of the magma at incredible speed, slashing its massive, razor-sharp claw toward Jinfrey. Fortunately, he reacted in time, parrying the attack with his sword. Behind him, the team remained hidden behind the boulders, shielding themselves from the powerful shockwave generated by the clash. Freyna watched in astonishment, amazed by the speed of both combatants. Helmbarrows, equally intrigued, observed Jinfrey's skill in deflecting its attack and remarked that he had piqued its interest. With a wicked grin, Helmbarrows leaped backward, declaring that Jinfrey should feel honored to have its attention. It then dove back into the magma, its voice echoing ominously as it taunted him, asking if he could parry its next move. Freyna noticed the voice coming from beneath the ground, her gaze darting nervously. Arthur, observing Jinfrey, asked what he was doing as he stood motionless with his eyes closed. Without warning, Helmbarrows erupted from beneath the ground directly behind the group, launching a devastating claw attack. Panic swept through the team as they braced for the worst, but Jinfrey effortlessly dodged the assault. He activated his magic perception skill just in time, allowing him to sense the incoming attack. Both the team and Helmbarrows were stunned by his precise evasion. Calmly, Jinfrey turned to face Helmbarrows, relying on the passive ability of his magic perception skill, which allowed him to detect the magical energy of adventurers and monsters within a 5-kilometer radius. Helmbarrows begrudgingly acknowledged his impressive reflexes, calling them good instincts. Jinfrey, however, corrected it with a smirk, stating that it wasn't instinct but familiarity. He simply knew its moves as well as he knew the back of his hand. Enraged by the response, Helmbarrows leaped away, shouting that Jinfrey was being arrogant and had only gotten lucky. It dived back into the magma again, warning him not to assume luck would always be on his side. Helmbarrows sneered that even if it missed, Jinfrey couldn't counterattack. Jinfrey teased it in return, asking mockingly how many times they would play whack-a-mole and urging it to stop talking and come out already. Jinfrey repositioned himself, raising his centipede sword while strategizing. He planned to use magic perception to locate Helmbarrows and combine it with the speed boost from Godspeed to launch a decisive counterattack. Closing his eyes, he focused, mentally reassuring himself that he had done this countless times before. Helmbarrows emerged again, this time appearing directly behind him. Arthur shouted a warning, but before Helmbarrows' claw could connect, it froze in shock as Jinfrey vanished. A moment later, he reappeared above the massive creature. With precision and speed, he descended, slashing the centipede weapon down onto Helmbarrows' body, the blow landing with a force that left the boss momentarily stunned. Helmbarrows recoiled in disbelief as Jinfrey raised his weapon again, smirking. He taunted the beast, calling it a puppy and demanding an answer. His voice laced with mockery, he asked if Helmbarrows still thought he couldn't counterattack. Helmbarrows was furious at Jinfrey's taunts, while Arthur, Freyna, and the rest of the team stood amazed by his audacity. The demon, with all its heads, declared him amusing for daring to run his mouth after landing a single hit. It also warned that it would not allow him to impede its mission any further. Jinfrey, puzzled by the mention of a mission, wondered what it could mean, as he had never encountered such a detail in the game. However, he set aside his curiosity, knowing there was no time to dwell on it. His focus needed to remain on the battle. The demon dove back into the magma, leaving Jinfrey momentarily frustrated. He recognized there was little point in lingering on the mystery of its words and resolved instead to prepare for his next attack. Helmbarrows soon resurfaced in front of him, striking with its massive claw. Jinfrey managed to dodge the blow and countered with a slash of his centipede weapon. The system confirmed that the attack had landed as a critical hit, triggering his mind's eye skill. Helmbarrows roared in pain, momentarily stunned as it appeared to question whether Jinfrey could truly see its movements before they occurred. Jinfrey, pleased with the result, noted not only the critical hit but also the effect of the poison he had inflicted. The demon's health began to deplete steadily thanks to the severe poisoning. One of Helmbarrows' heads snarled in outrage, accusing him of using underhanded tricks. Jinfrey calmly responded by pointing out that its lack of poison resistance was common knowledge to anyone prepared to face it. He rhetorically questioned why exploiting an enemy's weakness would be considered unfair, noting that battles were, after all, about strategy. Freyna and the others, observing from a distance, began to truly grasp the extent of Jinfrey's strength. Freyna, stunned, reflected on how many parties had fallen to this demon god, yet Jinfrey stood alone, fighting it on equal footing. With a smirk, Jinfrey mentally calculated the effects of the poison, estimating that Helmbarrows had about 5 minutes left to survive. The demon, enraged by his confidence, unleashed a stronger version of its scorching heatwave. The intense heat caused Arthur and the others to cry out in pain as it seared their skin. Arthur, realizing the danger, shouted that he couldn't get any closer. Freyna, quickly assessing the situation, ordered the group to retreat to a safer distance as the heatwave intensified. Arthur reluctantly complied, though he was visibly frustrated by his inability to assist in the fight. Looking back, he saw Helmbarrows furious and relentless, but Jinfrey remained standing in defiance. As the demon unleashed its fire breath, the team braced themselves for the worst. To their amazement, Jinfrey emerged unscathed. He considered the situation carefully, noting that this attack pattern differed from what he had known in the game. He began to speculate that the fire breath might be a unique move reserved for the boss's initial assault. Helmbarrows continued to lash out, accusing Jinfrey of using some kind of magical detection ability. Jinfrey, unfazed, dismissed the accusation as an excuse from a creature on the losing end. This response infuriated the demon further. The left head commented that even if Jinfrey could predict their moves, it would make little difference. The third head questioned whether he could handle an attack from all three of them at once, while the center head suggested that the outcome of such an assault would be decisive. The ground trembled violently as Helmbarrows' three heads began to separate from one another, forming three independent bodies. Arthur, Freyna, and the others watched in disbelief as the transformation unfolded. Jinfrey was equally stunned, realizing this development was completely new and had never been part of the game. The three bodies leapt away and dove into the magma, vanishing from sight. Jinfrey quickly acknowledged that while he could use magic perception to track their movements, he would struggle to fend off multiple simultaneous attacks. His thoughts were interrupted by one of the bodies emerging behind him, its voice taunting him before lunging with its claws. Jinfrey turned and dodged just in time, but he knew his critical health meant that even a single hit would be fatal. The left body surfaced in front of him, launching a vicious attack. Though he managed to evade, he found a certain thrill in the sheer chaos of the situation. The demon, now split into three forms, taunted Jinfrey further, promising to ensure that his companions would follow him to death so he wouldn't feel alone. The right body then lunged at high speed, its jaws open to deliver a killing blow. Before it could strike, Freyna intervened, activating her frost explosion skill, freezing the right body in its tracks. Stepping forward, Freyna expressed disdain for the imbalance of a 3-on-1 fight, adding that she took offense at being dismissed as dead weight. The right body, enraged by her boldness, turned its attention to her and launched a ferocious attack. Freyna stood her ground, but before the strike could land, Jinfrey swung his centipede weapon, severing the right head with a decisive blow. The severed head crashed to the ground, lifeless. Jinfrey turned to face the remaining two bodies, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He noted that the fight was now even and resolved to finish the battle quickly. The group stared at the lifeless body of Helmbarrows' right head, confirming its defeat. Cheers erupted among them, a sense of relief washing over the team. Jinfrey, on the other hand, was panting from exhaustion but steeled himself with the thought that only two heads remained to be defeated. Without warning, Helmbarrows reappeared behind him, furiously attacking with its claws while demanding how he dared to slay one of its brothers. Simultaneously, the left body lunged at Freyna, threatening to slice her to pieces. Both managed to block the attacks, though the effort left them shaken. Jinfrey turned to Freyna and asked about her ice magic capabilities, to which she admitted that while she could use it, her expertise lay in fire magic due to her lower affinity for ice. Jinfrey then inquired how she was handling the effects of the scorching heatwave so close to the battle, and she explained that she was using temporary buffs to negate the burn effect, though they wouldn't last much longer. Acknowledging this, he instructed her to hold on a bit longer. Activating his Godspeed skill, Jinfrey leapt behind Helmbarrow's central body, delivering a powerful slash to its back. In a single fluid motion, he turned in mid-air and dashed toward Freyna, who was holding off the left body. With precision, he stabbed the left body at its weak point, triggering his Mind's Eye skill to amplify the damage threefold. The strike proved fatal, and the system confirmed the defeat of Helmbarrow's left body. Glancing back, Jinfrey noted that the poison was still sapping the remaining head's health, which would make the final battle easier. However, the last body dove back into the magma before he could strike. Turning to Freyna, he assured her that things should be fine from there and encouraged her to take cover. Freyna acknowledged his words but moved closer, insisting on helping in any way she could. She cast the Sun Flame buff on him, which the system displayed as a temporary boost to his attack power, fire resistance, and the ability to stack with other effects. Jinfrey felt a surge of strength as his fire resistance increased further and expressed surprise at the potency of the buff. Freyna explained that as a condition for the spell, she wouldn't be able to use magic while the buff was active. She then retreated to a safer location, remarking that this was the best she could do. Jinfrey nodded and referred to her as Ms. Flame Magician to express his gratitude. Inside the volcano, Helmbarrow sat in the magma, seething with anger as it tried to recover. The demon couldn't comprehend how it had been brought to such a state by a mere human. Swearing revenge, Helmbarrow vowed to tear them all to shreds once its strength returned. Its thoughts were interrupted by Jinfrey's voice taunting it from above, mocking how much time it was taking to recover and questioning whether it had tired of playing whack-a-mole. Before Helmbarrow could respond, Jinfrey appeared in front of it, smirking. The sight left Helmbarrow in shock as it struggled to understand how a human could enter the heart of a volcano. Its confusion turned to fear as Jinfrey gestured dismissively, as if to brush off its presence. Helmbarrow, sweating in disbelief, found itself paralyzed by the impossible situation. Jinfrey then raised his centipede weapon and struck repeatedly. Helmbarrow could do nothing but despair as it realized the demon god was being defeated by a single human. As Helmbarrow fell, the volcano began to overflow with lava, causing panic among the team. They speculated about whether the volcano was erupting, but Freyna reassured them it wasn't. Arthur soon spotted Jinfrey climbing out of the volcano and rushed to his aid, expressing concern for his condition. The others gathered around, asking if the battle was truly over and calling for healing potions. Jinfrey calmly confirmed that the demon god was dead. Arthur, realizing the significance of the victory, turned to Freyna with tears in his eyes. Freyna, equally emotional, remarked that with Helmbarrow defeated, their father could finally rest in peace. Moments later, the system displayed a notification that the team had successfully defeated Helmbarrow, a level 50 demon god, and had earned rewards and experience points. Jinfrey was pleased to see he had gained 800,000 gold, joking to himself that his mother would be startled when she received it. The system further revealed his loot: Helmbarrow's Hard Claw, a Rarity S item, and Hunger Fang, a Rarity A item. While impressed by their rarity, he acknowledged that neither was what he truly wanted. Freyna, humbled, expressed uncertainty about how to properly thank him. Arthur added that without Jinfrey, they wouldn't have survived or even made it to the summit. Jinfrey dismissed the formal gratitude, pointing out that their efforts had contributed as well. Freyna noted that despite tagging along, the system had counted their participation, allowing her to receive demon god materials as drops. Jinfrey assured her she had earned them through her hard work and praised her final buff, which had been instrumental. Freyna modestly suggested he likely would have won without it, but lamented that the best reward she had received was a B-rank Scorching Rock. Hearing this, Jinfrey was stunned. He excitedly asked if she would trade the Scorching Rock for his S-rank Hard Claw, an offer that left both Freyna and Arthur speechless. Freyna questioned whether he understood the value of the Hard Claw, given its status as the highest-ranked material on the continent. Jinfrey replied that the Scorching Rock was far more valuable to him. Freyna ultimately agreed, insisting he take it without a trade. Overjoyed, Jinfrey asked for confirmation before happily adding the item to his inventory. Freyna watched him celebrate, noting with amusement that she couldn't read him at all. The sight of him raising the item in victory brought a soft smile to her face. Just then, the system displayed a notification indicating that Freyna had developed a slight crush on Jinfrey. Confused, he also noticed a warning about Jeddas, who apparently harbored a strong crush on Freyna. Sensing potential trouble, Jinfrey decided it was time to make a hasty retreat. With the Scorching Rock safely secured in his inventory, Jinfrey set his sights on his next destination, the second continent. a place known as the Town of Desires. Back in the central city of Rogue on the first continent, Freyna informed Jinfrey that she and Arthur had decided to return to their town to handle matters in their father's absence. She reassured him that they would meet again someday. Arthur, brimming with determination, vowed that the next time they met, he would be far stronger than Jinfrey. He expressed his heartfelt gratitude for everything Jinfrey had done. Jinfrey simply replied that he looked forward to it. As he walked away, Jinfrey waved goodbye, his thoughts turning to the scorching rock he had finally obtained. It was the material he needed from the first continent, and his memories from his previous life had proven invaluable in acquiring it. He also felt a sense of gratitude for the encounters and experiences he had along the way. With the money already sent home to his family, he resolved to move toward his next goal. Heading to the teleportation portal, he prepared to leave the first continent for the second. As Jinfrey approached the portal, he overheard two men discussing him. One man pointed him out and asked if he was the one who defeated the demon god. His friend dismissed the idea, pointing out Jinfrey's gear, which appeared to be nothing more than beginner equipment for a compounder, making it seem impossible that he could achieve such a feat. The system displayed a notification confirming his title as the first demon god slayer, and prompted him to proceed to the second continent. Jinfrey clicked to confirm, and the portal began its activation sequence. As he disappeared into the teleportation stream, one of the men remarked that Jinfrey had teleported. His friend, however, shrugged it off, saying he was probably imagining things. Jinfrey reappeared in the central city of the second continent, a bustling metropolis known as the Prison of Desire, often referred to as the Second Life. As he took in his surroundings, the system suddenly alerted him to a missed call. Checking the notification, he saw it was from Emilia, his younger sister. Curious about what she wanted, he quickly called her back. Before he could say much, Emilia demanded to know why he had sent such an enormous amount of money, where he was, and what he was doing. Her frantic tone startled him. She pressed him further, asking if he was involved in anything suspicious. Jinfrey calmly reassured her that he wasn't involved in anything illegal, though he was careful not to reveal his adventuring activities. He had deliberately kept his lifestyle a secret from both his mother and sister to avoid worrying them. Emilia, somewhat pacified, reminded him to be careful and then dropped a bombshell. She revealed that their mother's condition had worsened recently. The news shocked Jinfrey, leaving him deeply concerned. Sitting down on a nearby bench, Jinfrey grappled with the weight of the revelation. He realized he needed more money as quickly as possible to fund his mother's treatment. As he worried about her health, his thoughts were interrupted by a conversation between two men nearby. They were discussing an auction listing, and one of them mentioned that a high elf's tear was up for sale. The name immediately caught Jinfrey's attention. Recognizing it as a rare base ingredient for creating an elixir capable of curing almost any ailment, he knew it could be the key to saving his mother. High elf's tears were incredibly rare, especially on the second continent, where such items were almost unheard of. The chance to obtain one was astonishing, but Jinfrey also understood the challenges. The auction would attract the wealthiest elites in the region, and the item's price would likely soar into the hundreds of millions. Despite the daunting odds, Jinfrey resolved to secure the tier no matter what. Determined, he decided that his first step would be to increase his capital by any means necessary. Jinfrey arrived at the Attorney Snowfield, an E-rank dungeon on the second continent. Although his primary goal was to earn money, he acknowledged that raiding higher-ranking dungeons would be more efficient. However, the Attorney Snowfield dungeon held a unique opportunity. That guy was here. He smiled in relief when he spotted the Kate Sif, a level 66 creature lounging nearby. Taking a carefully preserved leaf from his inventory, Jinfrey swung it in front of the Kate Sif, presenting the items he had gathered along the way. The Kate Sif's eyes lit up with excitement as it noticed the Snowfield's silver vine, warm grass, and cold fish arranged before it. Pointing to the warm grass, Jinfrey explained that it was a cozy and fluffy bed, designed to suit the Kate Sith's preferences. Tempted, the creature released a delighted yowl and eagerly accepted the offerings. In its excitement, the Kate Sith dropped a golden coin, a Ranka item. Jinfrey picked it up, recognizing it as a fortune-boosting artifact that would double any money he earned while it was in his possession. He thanked the Kate Sith and left it to enjoy the warm grass, silver vine, and cold fish. Reflecting on the golden coin, he was pleased with the incredible deal. It was a hidden item that could only be obtained by appeasing the Kate Sith. With this newfound advantage, he resolved to begin hunting monsters immediately. Jinfrey's hunt proved profitable, yielding significant rewards. Monsters worth 80,650 gold, 2 worth 152,000 gold each, and 1 worth 1,110,100 gold fell before him. With the golden coin doubling these amounts, he quickly accumulated wealth. After defeating the dungeon's boss, he checked his balance and saw that his total had reached 12,664,000 gold. Confident this was enough to start his next venture, he decided to return to the city. A short while later, Jinfrey arrived at the Second Club, a notorious underground casino. The establishment was infamous for its patrons' obsession with money and its disregard for class or fairness, a dark zone where anything went. Jinfrey found the lack of rules liberating and felt no hesitation about diving in. As he descended into the casino, raucous laughter drew his attention. A bald man was shouting triumphantly, boasting about his incredible luck and how his fortunes had completely turned around. The man, whose name was revealed to be Intel, loudly declared that he couldn't lose today. Using his detect falsehood skill, Jinfrey uncovered the truth. Inte had raked in 10.22 million gold through fraudulent activities. Recognizing Inte as a cheater with substantial capital, Jinfrey decided to make him a target, mulling over how best to outsmart him. Approaching the table, Jinfrey caught Inte's attention. Inte, sizing him up, asked if Jinfrey was his next challenger. He smugly warned Jinfrey not to flee once he started losing, claiming that luck was firmly on his side. Jinfrey feigned innocence, laughing as he asked Inte to go easy on him since it was his first time there. Inte and the dealer exchanged subtle nods, clearly viewing Jinfrey as an easy mark. Inte assured him that the game was simple roulette and even allowed Jinfrey to go second, suggesting he could set the bet amount since Inte was winning so much already. Once again, Jinfrey's detect falsehood skill activated, exposing the dealer's intention to cheat. Realizing that the dealer and Inte were working together, Jinfrey felt a surge of amusement. To him, this place was as entertaining as ever. He reviewed the rules of roulette, known as the Queen of the Casino. The game involved the dealer throwing 2 balls onto the roulette wheel, and each player calling out 2 numbers. If one number was correct, the player won half their bet. Guessing both numbers correctly doubled the payout. If no one guessed correctly, the bets carried over to the next round. Players were forbidden from calling the same numbers twice. When Inte finished explaining the rules, he prompted Jinfrey to declare his numbers and bet amount. Without hesitation, Jinfrey chose red 36 and black 8, betting 10 million gold. His declaration left both Inte and the dealer visibly shocked. Jinfrey, confused by their reaction, repeated his numbers and the bet amount, ensuring there was no misunderstanding. He then reminded Inte to call his own numbers quickly, noting that if the balls stopped before Inte made his selection, he would lose automatically. Jinfrey added just enough pressure to fluster his opponent, all while smiling confidently. Deep down, he was certain that Inte couldn't handle the stakes he had just set. The dealer froze in shock upon hearing Jinfrey's bet and couldn't comprehend how he had accurately guessed where the balls would land. Meanwhile, Jinfrey kept pressing Inte to place his bet quickly, warning that the balls would soon stop spinning. Inte leaned toward the dealer, whispering frantically and urging him to hurry up and provide the numbers. The dealer, visibly frustrated, sighed in exasperation. Thanks to Lucifer's halo, Jinfrey had insight into the dealer's tactics. He knew that the dealer's job class was hunter and that the dealer was using the sniping eye skill, which allowed a 100% accuracy rate when targeting numbers. As the ball stopped spinning, the numbers landed on red 36 and black 8, just as Jinfrey had called. Gasps erupted from the surrounding crowd, and everyone stared at him in disbelief. Jinfrey remained calm, remarking nonchalantly that it seemed luck was on his side tonight. Jinfrey deduced the sequence. The dealer would activate Sniping Eye to lock onto the numbers, throw the roulette balls with perfect precision, and then relay the winning numbers to his cronies. While the strategy seemed foolproof, Jinfrey recognized its critical flaw. Once Sniping Eye was activated, the target numbers couldn't be changed. Inte, livid, screamed accusations of cheating and demanded the manager's presence. The manager rushed to the table, asking if everything was all right. Inte pointed an accusing finger at Jinfrey, claiming that he had cheated and everyone had seen it. The manager turned to Jinfrey, expressing astonishment at his fortune, acknowledging that landing a double call with such a large bet was extraordinary, but not impossible. The manager then suggested they step outside to have a word. Jinfrey remained silent, immediately suspecting that the manager was involved in the cheating as well. He could tell this chat would likely be anything but cordial. The manager quickly dropped the pretense and ordered his men to capture Jinfrey. The henchmen charged toward him, but Jinfrey flipped the table into their path, momentarily halting their advance. One of the men managed to circle behind him, attempting to grab him while sneering at him as just a kid. Jinfrey dodged effortlessly, delivering a precise strike to the man's nape, knocking him out cold. The other men froze in shock at the display. The dealer, regaining composure, drew a bow and aimed an arrow at Jinfrey while Inte lunged at him from behind with a knife. Jinfrey sidestepped Inte's attack with ease and delivered a powerful kick, sending Inte flying into the dealer, disrupting the shot. Both collapsed in a heap as Jinfrey turned to the remaining crowd, casually asking if anyone else wanted to try. The manager cursed under his breath, realizing Jinfrey was far more dangerous than anticipated. The assistant, pale with recognition, whispered something to the manager that made him stop. When the manager asked what he meant, the assistant explained that Jinfrey's appearance matched the description of the rookie mentioned in the news the day before, the one who had broken the baptism ritual record. The revelation stunned the manager, and he began to piece things together, wondering if this was truly the same person. When another henchman mentioned that Jinfrey's presence on the second continent meant he had already defeated the demon god Helmberos, the room fell into a hushed panic. Jinfrey, casually cleaning his ear, asked if they were going to throw him out and suggested they hurry up if so. The manager suddenly bowed deeply, shouting an apology. The abrupt shift left Jinfrey momentarily confused as the manager groveled, explaining that they never meant to accuse someone of his caliber of cheating. Internally, the manager panicked, knowing that if the rumors about Jinfrey were true, they had no chance against him. However, he also realized Jinfrey was still young, which meant there might be a way to minimize their losses. Feigning humility, the manager loudly proclaimed their regret and offered to do anything to make amends. Smiling faintly, Jinfrey gave his reply. He wanted all the money in the casino. The audacity of the demand shocked everyone, especially the manager. Before the manager could object, Jinfrey added that he also wanted an invitation to the auction. The manager's shock deepened, but Jinfrey calmly warned him to think of it as hush money and give his account details. Jinfrey stood up, suggesting that if the manager refused, he would either report their activities to public security or brawl his way through the establishment again. The manager, terrified, agrees to everything. The next morning, Jinfrey arrived at the Second Life Central Auction Hall. Checking his gold balance, he noted he had 570 million gold. Though he had hoped to secure more capital, he reasoned it would suffice for now. Missing the opportunity to acquire the High Elf's tier wasn't an option, as its availability was unpredictable. With the invitation he had coerced from the manager, Jinfrey successfully entered the auction hall. Now, all that remained was to outbid everyone for the items he needed. Meanwhile, at the second club, the establishment remained closed, and the manager sat in his office fuming. He cursed Jinfrey for having taken everything from them. His frustrations were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Turning, he was startled to see the branch master entering the office. Back at the auction hall, the host greeted the attendees, thanking them for their patience and announcing that the auction would officially begin. A total of 11 items were up for sale, many of which were rare and highly sought after. The host reminded everyone that detailed information on each item could be accessed via their status window. Starting with entry number 1, the host introduced the Orcish sword, an ornamental item ranked though it couldn't be equipped. It was prized by collectors worldwide. Jinfrey mentally reviewed his priorities. To create the elixir needed for his mother, he required 3 key items: the High Elf's tear, the Ice Chimera's fang, and the ancient red clay. He knew the tier could typically only be obtained from a hidden dungeon on the 6th continent, while the other 2 were drops from demon god dungeons on the 2nd and 3rd continents. Luckily, all 3 were up for auction here, potentially saving him significant time and effort. Smiling, Jinfrey realized this would allow him to focus entirely on preparing for future demon god fights without worrying about these components. As he scanned the catalog, another item caught his eye: Qinglong wine, a rare material essential for crafting hidden equipment. If he acquired it, he could produce the item far earlier than anticipated. The auction progressed, and by entry number 5, the host introduced the Ice Chimera's fang. The host explained it was a drop from a rare monster in the S-ranked dungeon on the 2nd continent, and opened the bidding at 500,000 gold. Jinfrey placed an initial bid of 1 million gold, but the room erupted in shock when someone countered with a bid of 10 million gold. Turning to see the source, Jinfrey spotted the manager, who fixed him with a cold, vengeful gaze. The message in his eyes was clear. He had no intention of letting Jinfrey win anything easily. Jinfrey clenched his teeth, frustrated that the manager had clearly held back some of the casino's funds. He realized the High Elf's tier would likely be one of the final items presented, so conserving his capital was crucial. The host declared the Ice Chimera's fang sold to the Wind Snake Guild for 10 million gold. Whispers filled the room as attendees noted the guild's participation, speculating that if the Wind Snake Guild wanted something, they would undoubtedly get it. Jinfrey, having read the manager's mind earlier, was aware of his connection to the guild but hadn't realized its size or influence spanned all 7 continents. Elsewhere in the auction hall, the branch master questioned the manager about Jinfrey's identity. The manager confirmed that Jinfrey was the troublemaker who had brawled in their casino, stolen their gold, and publicly used their auction invitation. Agreeing that this affront couldn't be ignored, the branch master instructed the manager to teach Jinfrey a lesson, and show him what it meant to challenge a guild that controlled the city from the shadows. When entry number 7, the ancient red clay, was introduced, the host explained it was a rare item from the 3rd continent's S-ranked dungeon. Jinfrey placed a bid of 50 million gold, but the Wind Snake Guild countered with 200 million gold, shocking the host and attendees. Jinfrey grimaced, realizing the guild's financial resources far surpassed his. The manager's mocking laughter rang out, brimming with malice. The system confirmed Jinfrey's suspicions, displaying that the guild intended to interfere with all his bids as revenge. He understood that failing to secure the High Elf's tier here would force him to extreme measures to obtain it later. Adapting his strategy, Jinfrey began placing smaller bids on unrelated items to provoke the guild into wasting their funds. He bid 40 million gold for a mermaid's large scale, prompting the Wind Snake Guild to bid 50 million. He bid 15 million for a blood murder's knife, and the guild countered with 20 million. When he bid 200 million for the Qinglong wine, the guild raised it to 300 million. The host remarked on the escalating rivalry, noting the auction had turned into a one-on-one battle. The crowd murmured, questioning whether the customer with the angel halo could compete financially against a massive guild. The manager, emboldened by the guild's deep pockets, laughed loudly. He mocked Jinfrey, calling him a fool for believing he could outbid them, and vowed to take everything Jinfrey wanted from the auction. Jinfrey, feigning frustration, ground his teeth as if in defeat. However, inwardly, he smirked, knowing the real fools were his opponents. The host announced that they were moving on to the final item of the auction. Drawing the crowd's attention, the host described the item as sacred yet mysterious, baptized as the most beautiful droplet in the world. With reverence, the host presented entry number 11, the High Elf's tier, proclaiming the starting bid at 50 million gold. Without hesitation, Jinfrey placed a staggering first bid of 500 million gold, leaving the room in stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the hall as the attendees struggled to process the amount. Most realized they had no hope of competing and resigned themselves to sitting this one out. Jinfrey smiled confidently, determined not to let this prized item slip through his fingers. As he waited for a counterbid, the manager's furious voice broke the silence. The manager accused him of getting serious now and shouted that it wouldn't matter, they would simply double his bid. The manager raised the stakes to 1 billion gold, but before the host could finalize the bid, a red mark appeared on the Wind Snake Guild's entry. The host hesitated, then made an announcement that shocked the room. The Wind Snake Guild representatives were disqualified from bidding on the item. The manager froze in disbelief, trying to process what had just happened. The host apologized to the Wind Snake Guild, explaining that they had reached their maximum successful bid limit. When the manager demanded clarification, the host elaborated that auction regulations allowed a single bidder to win a maximum of 5 items to prevent monopolization of rare goods. Since the guild had already secured 5 items, they were prohibited from further participation. The manager stammered before erupting in outrage, shouting that he was a regular at the event and had never heard of such a rule before. Jinfrey, meanwhile, couldn't suppress a smirk. He knew this was no ordinary auction, it was a special auction approved by the Adventurers Association. The strict rule against monopolization was one of its unique, hidden features. Even in the game, this setting had been obscure with no public announcement, making it an unanticipated obstacle for most participants. Jinfrey mockingly stuck his tongue out at the manager, inwardly laughing at how oblivious he had been. The unusual lineup of rare items should have tipped the manager off, but he had failed to recognize the significance of this event. The host, still maintaining professionalism, asked the manager if he understood the regulation. The manager remained trembling with fury, but the branch master beside him stayed unnervingly quiet, his calculating gaze fixed on the situation. The host declared the auction closed and congratulated Mr. Customer with the Angel Halo, naming Jinfrey as the victor of the High Elf's tier for 500 million gold. Applause filled the hall, recognizing Jinfrey not only as the winner of the auction but also as the man who had bested the powerful Wind Snake Guild. Jinfrey, ever composed, politely asked the host to refrain from calling him by that moniker in the future. The manager, however, snapped. His anger boiled over, and he shouted accusations at Jinfrey, demanding to know if he had known about the rules all along. When Jinfrey's calm demeanor gave no response, the manager's fury only grew. He bellowed that he had let Jinfrey off at the casino, but this time, there would be no mercy. With an enraged cry, the manager raised his hand, summoning a ball of destructive energy. Jinfrey immediately stood, recognizing the danger. He shouted at the manager to take the fight outside, pointing out that there were innocent people in the auction hall. Jinfrey warned him not to drag civilians into their conflict and reassured him that he wouldn't run away if the fight continued elsewhere. The manager hesitated, visibly seething. His rage was barely contained, but he understood the consequences of unleashing such a spell in a crowded hall. Despite the momentary pause, his anger burned brighter, his mind torn between pride and restraint as Jinfrey's composed demeanor only fueled his humiliation. The branch master interrupted the manager's outburst, firmly stating that it was enough. The sudden command left the manager stunned. The branch master agreed with Jinfrey, explaining that if they resorted to violence, the Adventurers Association would surely track them down. The manager, still fuming, argued that Jinfrey was mocking their guild and questioned how they could let him show such disrespect. The branch master, unwavering, reiterated that they were wasting their time and warned the manager not to make him repeat himself. Without another word, the branch master turned and walked away, instructing the manager to follow. The manager reluctantly complied, stuttering a response before trailing after him. A moment later, Jinfrey sat in the waiting area, reflecting on the unexpected nuisances at the auction. Despite the trouble, he had successfully secured the High Elf's tier, which was his primary goal. While annoyed that the Wind Snake Guild had claimed the Ice Chimera's Fang and the ancient red clay, he was confident he would find a way to obtain them soon enough. However, losing the Qinglong wine stung the most. He knew it was still possible to order the wine from the 5th continent, but doing so would require clearing a troublesome quest. If he'd won it today, crafting the next hidden equipment would have been much faster. Sighing in frustration, he resigned himself to chasing after the Wind Snake Guild again. His thoughts were interrupted by an unfamiliar voice. A woman remarked that he looked peculiar, startling him. Turning to her, he saw an adventurer who seemed intrigued by him. She pointed to the halo above his head, noting she'd never seen anything like it. Jinfrey stayed silent, wondering who she was. The woman apologized for her abruptness but pressed him further, asking what kind of relationship he had with the Wind Snake Guild and whether he had met their branch master. Jinfrey replied with a question of his own, asking who this branch master was. The woman explained it was the long-haired man who had been with the manager earlier, identifying him as the Wind Snake Guild's branch master for the 2nd continent. Recalling the man she referred to, Jinfrey admitted he didn't know him but acknowledged he had unresolved matters with the guild. He then shifted the conversation, asking the woman who she was. The woman introduced herself as an adventurer, explaining that she was tailing the guild for now. The system then displayed a notification revealing that Mira had been tasked by the Adventurers Association to investigate the Wind Snake Guild. Jinfrey wondered if this meant Mira was one of the 8 Guardians, the collective title given to the 8S rank adventurers officially recognized by the association. These individuals possessed extraordinary ability, honor, and wealth, making them elite figures in the adventuring world. Nostalgia washed over Jinfrey as he recalled his time in the game. After completing full clears, he would often take on the association's requests to pass the time. Returning to the present, he informed Mira that the Wind Snake Guild members had already left and asked if she was fine not chasing after them. Mira replied that she intended to pursue them, but first, she had one more question. She asked where he had obtained the halo floating above his head. The question startled Jinfrey, making him wonder if she was unaware of the existence of hidden equipment. He quickly realized the implications. Hidden equipment referred to items not recorded by the Adventurers Association, which could cause trouble if the association learned of their existence. Scrambling to deflect the question, he held his head and vaguely asked if she was talking about the halo. The system displayed a notification that his unusual equipment had piqued Mira's curiosity, labeling her as a gear geek. Confused, Jinfrey received another notification indicating that Mira found his angel halo adorable and wanted it for herself. Mira, unfazed by his awkward demeanor, reiterated her question, asking what it was. When Jinfrey hesitated, she interpreted his reaction as reluctance to explain and assured him it was fine. She added that she could investigate it herself if necessary. Without waiting for a reply, she thanked him and walked away, leaving Jinfrey with an awkward laugh. As he watched her leave, Jinfrey found it hard to believe that one of the 8 Guardians could be so fascinated by gear. He mused that Mira must be one of the most influential members of the 8 Guardians based on her composure and insight during their brief conversation. Meanwhile, Mira glanced back at Jinfrey as she walked away. Despite having traveled to the 7th continent and seen countless rare items, she had never encountered anything like the Angel Halo. Her curiosity deepened as she wondered just who Jinfrey truly was. Later, he found himself in the rank dungeon Moonlight Wasteland on the 2nd continent. He had already defeated the boss monster, a level 80 giant goblin. As a reward, he received the Goblin Snatcher Glove, an rank item. Its effect allowed him to incapacitate an opponent and select one item from their inventory to claim as his own. He smiled, satisfied that his level grinding was progressing smoothly. Initially, his plan had been to head to Grace Castle, the 2nd continent's S-rank dungeon, to obtain the Ice Chimera's Fang. However, he decided to retrieve a piece of hidden equipment first, which required him to borrow a few things from his targets. The Qinglong wine was essential for crafting his next hidden equipment, so he used magic detection to track the manager and branch master's location. He was currently tailing them, waiting for the right moment to strike. To his surprise, Mira was also there, though he suspected she had been following them long before he started. Mira eventually noticed him and wondered if he was also following the Wind Snake Guild. He was startled when he saw the guild members enter a hidden passage in the wall. The manager and branch master disappeared into what was revealed to be the Wind Snake Guild's private biotope. Inside, the manager nervously asked the branch master for his opinion on that year's yield, knowing his mood could determine his fate. The branch master replied that it seemed they could sell it at a better price. Relieved, the manager expressed optimism about boosting their capital again and promised to find people to help with production immediately. Their conversation was interrupted when someone nearby casually asked the manager if his hobbies included flower cultivation. The manager turned to see Jinfrey greeting him with a smile. Both the manager and branch master were shocked to see him and demanded to know how he had gotten there. Jinfrey, unfazed, stood his ground with a calm smile. The manager angrily shouted, asking if Jinfrey had been following them. Jinfrey responded by noting that the flowers around them were moonlight azaleas, which could be used as ingredients for magic doping. He warned them that magic doping was a dangerous and forbidden practice, as it could cause severe side effects, including hallucinations and, in extreme cases, death. He accused them of attempting something illicit and demanded to know their true intentions. The manager stammered, trying to explain, but the branch master coldly asked if Jinfrey was a spy for the Adventurers Association. Jinfrey denied this, offering a deal instead. If the branch master handed over the Qinglong wine, he would turn a blind eye to their activities. Calmly, he asked the branch master for his decision. The manager, enraged, called Jinfrey a foolish brat. He released his magic and demanded to know who Jinfrey thought he was talking to. In an instant, Jinfrey appeared behind the manager, startling Mira, who had been watching from a distance but couldn't hear what was happening. Grabbing the manager's shoulder, Jinfrey assured him it wasn't a threat, just a negotiation. He even offered to pay for the wine. The manager, still furious, shouted that Jinfrey's real goal at the auction had been the Qinglong wine and declared that they would never hand it over. Taking out a dagger, the manager muttered that Jinfrey only had himself to blame for what was about to happen. As the manager launched the dagger, Jinfrey remarked that if they didn't cooperate, he would have no choice but to report the flower field to the Adventurers Association. Effortlessly dodging the attack, Jinfrey summoned his centipede weapon. Aiming the handle at the manager, he reminded him that he had brought this on himself. With a swift strike to the nape, Jinfrey knocked the manager unconscious, leaving him collapsed on the ground. Mira, watching from her hiding spot, couldn't believe what she had just seen. Jinfrey had taken down the manager with a single strike, leaving him unconscious. She also noticed that she had never seen a weapon like his before. Meanwhile, the branch master approached Jinfrey, calling him a persistent fly and remarking on his boldness in picking a fight with outlaws who worked in the shadows. Samon, the Wind Snake Guild's branch master for the second continent, was a level 97 warrior. Drawing his sword, he asked Jinfrey if he understood what was about to happen. He added that he had been holding back for too long. Jinfrey, unfazed, replied that he too had been holding back and had spent far too much time there. He needed to blow off some steam. Nearby, Mira observed the exchange and debated whether she should intervene. However, her curiosity about Jinfrey's weapon led her to hold back a little longer. Jinfrey and Samon faced off, their swords drawn. Samon lunged forward, and Jinfrey mirrored his movement, meeting him in the center. The clash of their swords echoed loudly. Jinfrey was aware that Samon's level was significantly higher than his own. They forcefully pushed their swords apart before Samon launched into a series of rapid slashes. Jinfrey struggled to block the onslaught, Samon's speed overwhelming him. Mira, watching closely, remembered that Jinfrey was a new adventurer who had shattered records during the Adventurers Association's baptism ritual. She thought he had an impressive combat sense, but in terms of sheer strength, Samon was clearly superior. Samon dominated the fight, forcing Jinfrey onto the defensive. Each blow from Samon's sword pushed him back, but Jinfrey managed to stop himself from being thrown completely off balance. Samon acknowledged Jinfrey's skill, remarking that he wasn't bad for a rookie. However, he insisted that Jinfrey couldn't possibly win and mockingly asked if Jinfrey saw himself as some sort of hero fighting to the bitter end. Jinfrey calmly replied that he wasn't interested in being a hero or dying gloriously. He was pursuing his own goals, and nothing, not here, not now, would make him stop. Infuriated, Samon sneered and called Jinfrey a weakling before launching another attack. His sword swung repeatedly with tremendous force, driving Jinfrey back with each strike. Jinfrey gritted his teeth, refusing to step away even as he struggled to hold his ground. Samon began to feel an unusual sensation during the fight. He couldn't pinpoint what it was, but something about Jinfrey felt off. Samon dismissed the idea of using his job skills, assuming it wasn't necessary, but that changed when he noticed something strange. Both Samon and Mira were stunned to see Jinfrey blocking and dodging Samon's relentless attacks with his eyes closed. Samon quickly realized Jinfrey was reading and memorizing his movements by sensing his magic power alone. It was an extraordinary feat, one Samon had never seen before. He wondered if it was a unique job skill or an ability linked to Jinfrey's equipment since Jinfrey hadn't used any items to boost his performance. Meanwhile, Jinfrey, with his eyes still shut, calmly deflected Samon's strikes. His composure only served to frustrate Samon further. Finally, Jinfrey pushed Samon back and smiled as a brilliant light emanated from the angelic halo on his head. Mira shielded her eyes from the dazzling glow. Jinfrey realized he had unlocked the third skill of Lucifer's Halo. He knew the condition to unlock it, maxing out the hidden parameter, Magic Sensing, to level 252. This parameter could only be raised by parrying enemy attacks in combat, with the skill experience gained proportional to the experience earned from defeating strong opponents. Thanks to this fight in his earlier battle with the demon god on the first continent, Jinfrey had successfully maxed out the parameter. He reflected that it usually took far more time to achieve such a feat. However, Samon's strength had accelerated the process, making him feel incredibly fortunate. His thoughts were interrupted when Samon's sword suddenly pierced his chest. Jinfrey collapsed to the ground, his eyes wide with shock. Samon sneered, calling him a fool for losing focus in the middle of a fight. The branch master mockingly lectured him about overestimating his own strength, adding that the world was vast, and there was always someone better. Just as Samon was about to walk away, he felt a chilling presence behind him. Jinfrey, his voice steady, told Samon to save his speech and asked him who was really better. Samon immediately turned to face Jinfrey, staring at him in confusion. He struggled to understand what had just happened, wondering if it was some kind of job skill or special ability. Jinfrey, smirking, teasingly asked Samon if he didn't find it embarrassing to get so hyped up and talk to himself like that. Mira, observing the scene, was equally shocked and began to suspect that there was something very strange about Jinfrey. Samon looked down, realizing that even the body he had supposedly slain had vanished, though he could still recall the sensation of slashing through Jinfrey's form. Before he could process what was happening, blood suddenly began to pour from his own body. Looking down, he saw that he had been pierced by a sword. Panic set in as he wondered how Jinfrey had managed to do it without even moving. His confusion deepened when a swarm of knives appeared out of nowhere and impaled him, eliciting a scream of agony. Samon writhed in pain, unable to comprehend what was happening. To Mira, however, it appeared as though Samon had simply started howling uncontrollably, leaving her to wonder what unseen force was tormenting him. On the other hand, Jinfrey calmly retrieved his centipede weapon and returned it to his inventory. Smiling, he watched Samon's suffering, knowing it was the result of Lucifer's Halo's third skill, Phantom Playground. This ability caused vivid hallucinations in anyone who made direct eye contact with the user. The skill had a cooldown of 72 hours, making it a powerful but sparingly usable tool. Jinfrey spoke up, mocking Samon for lecturing him about the vastness of the world as if Jinfrey didn't already know it. At that moment, Mira emerged from her hiding spot and approached him. Jinfrey turned to her and asked if she'd enjoyed tailing him. Mira realized that he'd known all along that she was following him. However, she clarified that she wasn't tailing him specifically. Her business was with Samon. Jinfrey acknowledged this and guessed she was on a mission from the Adventurers Association. He then suggested that reporting the guild's cultivation of moonlight azaleas should suffice for her mission. Turning away, he added that he'd leave the cleanup to her since he wasn't involved in any of it. As he was about to leave, he stopped abruptly, remembering something important. Laughing, he opened his inventory and retrieved the Goblin Snatcher glove. Putting it on, he approached the unconscious manager and apologized in advance, saying he'd be borrowing something. With a touch, he activated the glove's effect and retrieved the Qinglong wine, an S-rank item. Satisfied, he noted that the wine would make the second demon god battle much easier. Smiling to himself, he whispered a message to his mother, promising her to wait just a little longer. When he turned back, he noticed Mira glaring at him suspiciously, causing him to flinch. Stuttering, he nervously asked her if she had a problem and insisted that everything he'd done was perfectly legal. Mira, still watching him closely, agreed that she had no complaints. Reassured, Jinfrey resumed walking away, telling her that this time, he was leaving for good. Mira stood silently, watching him disappear into the distance. She turned her attention to Samon, who continued to scream in agony. Reflecting on the battle, she realized there had been no evidence of Jinfrey using items or conventional job skills. This led her to conclude that the power he displayed was likely tied to his equipment. Mira speculated that if Jinfrey's equipment was forbidden by the association, the situation would become far more complicated. However, she was certain that his gear wasn't on the list of banned items. One thing was clear, Jinfrey was far from an ordinary adventurer. A moment later, Jinfrey arrived at Life's second Tobar's workshop on the second continent. Relieved to have finally reached his destination, he glanced at the Qinglong wine and the wood in his hands, thinking it was time to craft the next piece of hidden equipment. Suddenly, the shop door burst open, and an angry man stormed out, yelling at the workshop's owner. The man furiously called Tobar a stone-headed geezer before storming off. Jinfrey watched the scene unfold, sympathizing with the man's frustration, but knowing that without the proper gift, Tobar wouldn't give anyone the time of day. Jinfrey entered the shop, excusing himself politely, only to be greeted by a flying screw and hammer. Prepared for Tobar's temper, he blocked the projectiles with the wood in his hands. The legendary blacksmith, Tobar, shouted at him, calling him a snotty brat and telling him to stop disturbing his work. Tobar angrily ordered him to leave, insisting he had no equipment for him. Ignoring the outburst, Jinfrey thinks that Tobar hadn't changed at all. Tobar approached him in a fit of rage, shouting at him for barging in uninvited. He tried to shove Jinfrey out, but Jinfrey stood his ground and addressed him as Mr. Tobar, asking him to listen for just a moment. Tobar bristled, yelling at him not to use his name so casually and demanding he leave immediately. In response, Jinfrey revealed the Qinglong wine, holding it up as he mentioned it was a shame to bring such amazing liquor only to leave. Tobar's demeanor instantly shifted as his eyes widened in shock. He jumped repeatedly, trying to grab the bottle, demanding to know how a brat like Jinfrey had managed to obtain such a rare treasure. Tobar shouted at him to leave the wine and get out, making Jinfrey chuckle inwardly at how predictable Tobar was. Tobar, desperate, kicked at him repeatedly, yelling for the wine, but Jinfrey held it just out of reach. Jinfrey then casually mentioned that he also had a scorching rock, a rank B item. Tobar froze in surprise. Moments later, they were seated across from each other, sharing a drink. Jinfrey poured Tobar a cup of Qinglong wine, and the blacksmith's eyes filled with tears as he reminisced about his late wife, who had loved that particular wine, especially when heated by a scorching rock. Jinfrey feigned surprise, pretending it was new information, though Tobar had told him the same story countless times before. Pouring another drink for Tobar, Jinfrey thought to himself that he had successfully triggered the hidden event. He knew that simply handing over the Qinglong wine would earn him an S-rank piece of equipment, which was good but not the best outcome. By bringing both the Qinglong wine and the scorching rock together, he could obtain an unknown grade item instead. As Tobar cried, lamenting his shortcomings as a husband, Jinfrey handed him a cloth to wipe his tears, resigning himself to the fact that it was going to be a long night. After staying up with Tobar through the night, Jinfrey woke to the sound of a hammer striking metal. The next morning, Tobar, smiling, approached him and thanked him for the incredible wine. Pointing to a newly finished item, Tobar proudly told him to take it. Jinfrey grinned and thanked the legendary blacksmith, remarking that it was exactly what he expected from someone of Tobar's caliber. He had received his third piece of hidden equipment, Idaton's leg. Its unknown rank indicated its rarity and power. The equipment had impressive stats, with a speed of 120 and durability of 5000. Skill 1, free walking allowed him to walk freely, regardless of environmental conditions. Skill 2, Tempest teleportation enabled teleportation within a 100-meter radius, usable 5 times per day. Skill 3, unknown, this skill would unlock once certain conditions were met. Jinfrey knew his business with Tobar was complete for now. Thrilled with his new acquisition, he looked ahead to his next challenge. Excitedly, he declared to himself that he was ready to face the second continent's S-rank dungeon, Grace Castle. As Jinfrey prepared to leave, Tobar threw something at him, calling it a parting gift. Inspecting it, he saw the system identify it as non-alcoholic hot sake. Ranked to the system description noted that drinking it would grant a supreme warm state. Tobar asked if Jinfrey was heading to the S-rank dungeon, but Jinfrey only thanked him for the sake. Tobar warned him to be careful, mentioning that the ice demon god was a cunning monster. With a wave, Jinfrey bid farewell and departed. Shortly after, he arrived at the entry gate of the second continent's S-rank dungeon, the Ice Castle. Walking through the snow without any protective clothing, the bitter cold seeped into him. Remembering Tobar's gift, he retrieved the non-alcoholic hot sake and drank it. Almost instantly, warmth spread through his body, and the system displayed a notification that the supreme warmth state had been activated for 100 minutes. Relieved, he thought the cold would no longer be an issue thanks to the sake. As he approached, a few people at the gate noticed him. One man pointed out his thin clothing and questioned whether he could survive dressed like that. His companion remarked that Jinfrey must be underestimating the harshness of the winter mountains. The companion then pointed at the halo over Jinfrey's head, commenting on how strange it looked. Whispering to each other, they speculated that he might not be all there mentally because of the halo. Irritated by their remarks, Jinfrey told the system to remain silent. The system displayed a reminder about the dungeon's time limit. Adventurers could only stay in the S-rank dungeon for 2 hours. Exceeding this limit would trigger a forced teleportation back to town, with half of their possessions and money confiscated as a penalty. Reflecting on his earlier struggles, Jinfrey remembered how often he had been penalized in the game's early days. Determined to avoid such setbacks, he pressed forward into the dungeon. Inside, he immediately sensed an immense concentration of magical energy emanating from the demon god's castle. Spotting a few strong adventurers already ahead, he realized he needed to act quickly to reach the demon god's chamber and obtain the ice chimera fang before anyone else. Meanwhile, the two men from earlier climbed the mountain, struggling against the conditions. The man in the green hat complained about how difficult it was to keep moving forward, and his companion in the brown hat agreed, saying that at their current pace, they would run out of time. Suddenly, a massive creature appeared before them. It was a Crinculus, level 82, growling loudly as it prepared to attack. The brown hat man shouted about how the monsters kept spawning and lamented that at this rate, he would never make it to the demon god's castle. The Green Hat Man remained silent, staring ahead in shock. The Brown Hat Man yelled at his friend, demanding to know why he wasn't casting support magic. Before he could respond, both men froze as they saw Jinfrey walking effortlessly through the air, completely ignoring the Crinculus. Jinfrey, enjoying the surreal feeling of walking in the air, marveled at how free walk, the first skill of Idaitan's leg, allowed him to move as if gravity didn't exist. His thoughts were interrupted when two Crinculus lunged at him. Without hesitation, he sliced them apart with swift, precise movements. Apologizing for the inconvenience, he pressed on, aware that he was in a hurry. The two men, along with the Crinculus they were fighting, were stunned by what they had just witnessed. The Brown Hat Man pointed out that Jinfrey was the same person they had seen at the gate earlier. The Green Hat Man agreed, speculating that his ability to walk in the air might have something to do with his halo. Both began shaking, whispering to each other in fear that Jinfrey might be a floating spirit, a term used in MMORPGs for ghostly entities. They even muttered prayers for the fallen Crinculus, treating the slain monsters with reverence. Jinfrey overheard their chatter and warned them that if they repeated themselves, he would smash their HUD. Ignoring them, he arrived at the demon god Ormud's castle. Checking the time, he was satisfied with his 5-minute pace. His relief was short-lived, however, as he noticed Mira standing near the gate. Recognizing her as one of the 8 protectors, he felt a wave of frustration. He suspected that she was after hidden equipment and questioned why someone of her caliber would even be there, as she should have cleared the ice castle long ago. Mira examined the gate's intricate patterns, appearing deep in thought. She seemed to be following rumors about someone supposedly hiding within the castle. Though she doubted their validity, she considered the possibility that it might be true. Summoning a surge of energy, she shattered the gate with ease. Jinfrey shielded his face from the blast, stunned by her sheer power. Watching her enter the castle, he realized how deserving she was of her title as one of the 8 protectors. The shattered gate left him an opportunity to bypass its usual mechanisms. Before he could proceed, however, he sensed several Crinculus approaching. Frustrated, he activated Gale Transfer, the second skill of Idaitan's leg. Just as the Crinculus lunged at him, he vanished, reappearing within the 9th floor's extreme ice room hallway. Grateful for the skill, he noted how much time it had saved him. Ahead lay the mid-boss's room, the final challenge before reaching the demon god's chamber on the 10th floor. Opening the door, he steeled himself for the fight. With Idaitan's leg, he wondered if this run might set a new record. Meanwhile, on the annex's 7th floor, within a hidden ice room, screams echoed as chaos unfolded. One of the men turned to their master, Garyuda, pleading to understand why this was happening. He reminded Garyuda of how much they had struggled to reach this place. Garyuda, the guild master of the Wind Sword Guild and a swordsman by trade, stood with a furious expression. The system displayed his clear time limit as 1 hour and 26 minutes. He angrily asked his subordinates what was going on and blamed them for their sluggishness. Garyuda swung his sword in rage, shouting at them for keeping him waiting. Without hesitation, he decapitated one of the men, increasing his clear time limit by 2 hours and 42 minutes. He then demanded to know how they intended to take responsibility if his treasure and money were halved due to their incompetence. The remaining men apologized profusely, but Garyuda dismissed their words coldly. He declared that a life without value was a crime and that those without value should die and atone to gain any worth. Raising his sword again, Garyuda executed 2 more men, bringing his clear time limit to 4 hours and 21 minutes. His assistant, standing to the side, closed his eyes in despair. Panic erupted among the others as some attempted to flee while others begged for their lives. Garyuda, unrelenting, slaughtered the remaining members, increasing his clear time limit to 8 hours and 7 minutes. He mockingly stated that their lives were worth only a few hours at best. Turning to his assistant, Garyuda demanded to know if this was all he had brought today, shouting that it was nowhere near enough. The assistant stuttered in fear, apologizing repeatedly and explaining that they had been working hard to gather more people, but it was taking time. Garyuda coldly asked if the assistant was ready to die now. Terrified, the man bolted, promising to quickly find more people. As he fled, he couldn't help but wonder how many lives Garyuda intended to take and if his plan was to hold out there for months. He marveled grimly at how killing adventurers allowed them to steal their remaining clear time. Garyuda watched the man rush away, his glare icy. His thoughts turned to Samon, one of their allies, who had been captured by a woman from the 8 protectors. He knew their guild was in serious trouble, with the association targeting its executives. Despite this, he believed their methods remained outdated. The Annex, with its time limit advantage, was a great hideout, even if their enemies found them. Meanwhile, inside the 9th floor's main building, Jinfrey hovered in the air, fighting monsters. His aerial combat gave him a significant advantage, allowing him to slash through them effortlessly before they could react. He found the free movement exhilarating, marveling at how Idaitan's leg was undoubtedly the best equipment. However, his thoughts turned to the enormous magical energy he had been sensing. He realized it came from the 10th floor, where the second demon god resided. Simultaneously, he felt another, even more dangerous magical power emanating from the annex. He reminded himself to be cautious, focusing on his priority, defeating the demon god. After swiftly eliminating a swarm of monsters in the room, he turned his attention to the next challenge, expecting the mid-boss. As the room's door opened, Mira walked in. Startled, Jinfrey remained suspended upside down in the air, keeping out of sight. Detecting a powerful magical presence, he sighed in relief, knowing he had narrowly avoided being spotted. He wondered why Mira had come all the way up there. Mira looked around, finding the area suspiciously empty. Moments later, 2 level 92 snow golems appeared behind her. Surprised by their sudden arrival, she thought it unusual for a mid-boss to take such a form. Mira exhaled deeply, summoning her wind spirit. Jinfrey, observing her from his vantage point, was astonished. To master such a skill required a high-level summoner. Mira directed her wind power at the snow golems, apologizing as she stated that she didn't have time to deal with them. She released a tornado around the mid-boss, causing the wind to swirl violently. Tightening her grip, she transformed the tornado into electric wind, which shattered both golems into pieces. Jinfrey couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Mira had defeated the mid-boss in a single strike, taking down 2 powerful foes simultaneously. He realized the vast difference between their capabilities. Mira faced the door ahead, knowing that defeating the mid-boss had revealed the stairs leading directly to the demon god's chamber. However, she turned around, deciding to search the area thoroughly. She muttered about heading to the annex next, clearly looking for someone. Jinfrey, relieved that she wasn't interested in the demon god, stayed hidden. As she moved, she suddenly paused, sensing his presence. Looking back, she scanned the area. Jinfrey disappeared just in time, leaving her to dismiss it as her imagination. Turning her focus back to her mission, she exited the room. On the 10th floor, Jinfrey arrived at the demon god Ormud's chamber. Pushing open the door, he stepped inside to find Ormud sitting on a throne, surrounded by adventurers impaled on sharp blocks of ice. Jinfrey greeted Ormud, remarking that it had been a while since their last encounter. He addressed the being as the second demon god Ormud. The demon god, a level 100 entity with the crown of death trait that reduced all adventurers' abilities in the chamber by 20%, chuckled mockingly. Ormud teased, asking who the lost animal was that had wandered into his domain.